Blog Talk Radio.
You know the man behind the power, Miracle, fire, science, all the members of the fall, multinational, really forgot, and all the keys of the secret, majestic 12, Roman curious, and all the playful gentlemen, the golden dawn, the OTO. Oh, we are everywhere, in the side of the octopus. It's just a 12-letter word, so you can see clearly now, but it's still obscure, and your vision will forever be blurred. Right now.
Welcome to our Dark Digest episode 21 with your host, Christian Coughlin. Today, April 21st, 2019.
We would like to share a prayer with all of you who risk it all to seek and share truth for the betterment of humanity. This broadcast is brought to you in part by Eternal Affairs Media and DarkDocs.com.
Yeah, and of course, since it is an all-male encampment, whenever they do these plays and such, much like the Greeks, men are playing the roles of any women that are written into the script. So, naturally you're going to have a lot of cross-dressing, which, is fine, if that's what you're into. But we've had a lot of fun pictures of people like Henry Kissinger and David Rockefeller dressed in full drag with makeup and wigs and, dancing the show tunes. And
I have a very interesting thing to read to you. This comes out of the Annals of the Bohemian Club, Volume 7, 1987 to 1996. And it's entitled George Bromley and the Cremation. After researching prior Bohemian annals, one concludes the cremation of care ceremony is worth more than a passing notation. No other single event so entertainingly communicates the essence of Bohemia, especially as it relates to the aura of Bohemia's home, the Grove. Most of us have heard that the cremation of care is a concept akin to Shakespeare's Midsummer Night's Dream, combined with some fraternal-like ritual. And many of us know that the contemporary lakeside pageant is a combination of varied material pieced together by the creative skills of the late author, director, and club president, Charlie Field, who later received revisional input from his nephew Palmer Field. But few know its true origins, let alone the evolutionary process which has taken more than a century to develop into this longest-running show in Bohemia's history. The genesis actually dates back to 1872, the year our club is founded by James Bowman and some of his newspaper colleagues, after Bowman's wife threw them out of her home, thus giving rise to the formation of the Bohemian Club. From time to time, Bowman conducts impromptu initiation rites immediately following the evening hijinks program in the rented club room located in Sacramento and Webb Streets. His first selects several new members as his pigeons, and then begins to question them in humorous ways to their acknowledge and understanding of duties and responsibilities of Bohemian membership. One of those new members in April 1873 is 56-year-old George T. Bromley, after whom Camp Bromley is named. He has not only a creative showbiz mind, but a comic sense of humor equal to that of a vaudeville stand-up comedian. Showmanship and all. Bowman's initiation rites quickly take root in Bromley's witty, fertile mind. The first appearance of Bromley in the role of a newly created character is on August 30th, 1873, during Jinx' program. The club's circular announces, His Eminence Archbishop Bromley, B.C., will preside as chaplain. Bromley's tongue-in-cheek initiation services are so entertainingly successful that within 3 years it becomes standard periodic entertainment, and the club, 1876, officially votes him title of High Priest of Bohemia in perpetuum. Uncle George, as he was affectionately called, dresses in colorful ceremonial gown for his comedy shticks. He uses a flaming cauldron and a stuffed owl as his key props. And with the passing of time, the ceremonial services have become more elaborate. But it is still a one-man show. The next evolutionary step toward the development of the cremation of care comes in June 1878 during a picnic held in Marin. This occasion, the genesis of the annual Midsummer Encampments, is held in honor of Henry Edwards, four-term president who, being a professional stage actor, was moving to the New York theater circuit. The picnic is billed as Summer Jinks in the Redwoods. 2 years later, during the encampment near Gurn's Mill, later becoming the city of Guerneville, the cremation ceremony is inaugurated. It is a special, colorful program created by Bohemian Frederick Summers with able assistance from High Priest of Bohemia, George Bromley. The ceremony is a simple one, compared to our current musical pageant. Moreover, Bromley continued to make the event a comical one, making it tongue-in-cheek, like, "Friends, Bohemians, and countrymen, I come here to bury care, not to praise him, to place upon this pyre all our prejudices, all of our resentments, all our thoughts that are in spirit harmful to men and women, and all of our unpaid bills. And let us place here everything in our daily life that vexes or annoys us, hatred, malice, and all uncharitableness. Let us not place here the memory of good men and noble women. Rather, let such recollections live in our hearts for our guidance. Finally, in the name of the owl, that revered bird of wisdom, I place on this coffin all the sins and sorrows of every member of our beloved organization, and from the ashes may great joy ascend." With this cue, costumed imps touch their torches to the four corners of the funeral pyre. The care's coffin is enveloped, and the next moment there is an explosion. Rockets go streaming up into the heavens. Bursting bombs sent forth colored lights into the velvet of darkness. For the whole coffin is full of fireworks, which ascend whizzing, banging, and whirling in a display of pyrotechnic splendor. The band strikes up a merry tune. Bohemians, joining hands, dance around the flaming bonfire until the last firecracker goes off. Then the members fall in line and march back to their camps in a lively, quick step. It's time for cocktails and supper. Bromley exclusively retained the title and character of High Priest for 33 consecutive years until his death in 1909 at the age of 92. It was then that the cremation became discombobulated, and the newly formed Jinks Committee discontinued its production until it was taken off the shelf, rewritten, and restaged by club president Charlie Field into a musical pageant at the Grove's New Lake in 1923, joined later by Haig Padigan's artistic creation of the Owl in 1930. The Owl.
Yeah, did you find anything on the Buddha? I remember we were talking before. There was an owl, the 40-foot statue of the owl. There was a Buddha statue in that same place. Is that correct?
That's right.
Yes, it's funny. Like, I've seen pictures of it, but in all the stuff that I've read, there's kind of no mention that I've seen of it.
The cremation was staged, like it's derived from a play that they would have. He died at the end of the play, and then they cremated his body. And we have that play. I believe it's one of the first plays. And it got shortened down and rewritten, expanded into what it is today. It's vastly different than what it was.
Yeah, now it's much more theatrical, and you have Dull Care having his own voice and fighting back. And, that's where you get, when Alex Jones came in, the sound clip of, fools, you think you can burn thee, and all that fun stuff. and then they, all the cackling and howling, and then they finally, with all of their power together as the brothership of Bohemia, then only with that they are able together to cremate Care, to destroy their conscience, from what I understand, allowing them to be able to do anything that they want without any sort of repercussion of morality.
Sounds silly. The whole thing just sounds silly. Sounds silly. It sounds childish. I don't understand what the hell they're doing out there. Do they really need to? Hey, go to such lengths, and I don't know. And that's all.
Yeah, I mean, at first it sounds very sophomoric, and that's how they play it off. All of the Bohemian Grove apologists, like the Spinal Tap guys that made that film that never really got released, the Teddy Bear's Picnic, where instead of an owl, it's a pelican. Instead of care, it's time, and all of that. And they're just like, it's just a boys' club. It's no big deal. But I mean, I think that's what they want us all to think, to kind of discredit any really real conversations looking into it. But when you look at the secrecy, you look at the security, and you look at how seriously they take this whole operation, it is definitely. And once you read the annals, once you really look into the methodology of all of this, this is something that in my opinion, I think is very sacred to the highest echelons of this organization, which are people in great positions of power, not only here in the United States, but worldwide, members of the Bilderberg Group, the Council on Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission, the Bilderberg Group. These are the same names of names that show up, in the World Trade Organization, Fortune 500 companies, most mainstream media outlet chairmen and CEOs, CFOs. And I really believe that they really believe that doing this ritual really does, in fact, I mean, you could say it's the placebo effect, that, that by doing this, it's a way for them to kind of feel like, oh, well, great, now I can go on with my business. It's very similar in Christianity, almost, to, when you dip yourself in the water, you get a baptism, like born-again Christians and things like that. All your sins have been washed away, like in "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?" And they think that they can just continue on with a clean slate, and they can do this every year. So they can just always go back to the Grove and wash themselves clean and continue to carry out their wicked ways.
On that are there any plays or anything like that we found that have Buddha in it? A big Buddha statue? I haven't seen anything.
I haven't seen. And even the Fall of Ugg, that was staged on their main Grove stage area.
That was a weird play.
Very interesting because that is the only genuine part of anything Bohemian related that I've researched that even refers to Moloch in any way. And,
it's only like one, right? One little.
Yeah, he's one of the several deities that kind of make their appearance during the play, and it's completely not the Moloch that so many people are hoodwinked.
I think the whole Moloch thing, honestly, the more I look into it, is just a misconception, and I can understand it. If you ever saw the one of the very first films ever made, Metropolis, have you guys seen that? The black and white film Metropolis? Yeah. So in that film, the main actor has kind of like a hallucination when he is at his father's company, that all these men are working, with these like big machines and stuff, and there's some sort of accident, and the machines end up like grinding men up into the gears of the machine, which I always took as kind of like a metaphor for industrial society and how, you know, it pretty much just grinds the human spirit. It takes our work, our effort, and it, you know, put it. We're pretty much just fuel for the common collective, and I think that was one of the concerns at the time of, you know, this kind of building of an industrialized society. And then he had this, you know, hallucination at one point where the men are all falling into the flames in front of this big bull with horns, and it's like this almost like demonic devil-like figure. And then for a couple of frames on the screen, it says Moloch. Right after that whole scene happens. Definitely rewatch that film if you haven't. Anyone listening, you know, it's on archive.org. In fact, I'm going to take it from archive.org and re-upload it to darkdocs.com, because I think that this film talks about a lot of stuff. It talks about the transhumanist agenda, how in the end of the film they make this artificial human being that is AI, essentially, and it ends up becoming the destroyer that is like going after everyone in the film and things like that, and then they have to destroy this transhumanist, you know, bastardization of humanity. And it's almost like saying we shouldn't try to do that. Like that, you're building the Antichrist, you could argue, from like a religious standpoint. And so with that being said, and all those references, I can definitely see the similarities. And if you look up Moloch, it's a very similar thing. Again, it's a deity, and you usually place some sort of like funeral pyre in front of it, and you do a ceremony with robes, you gather around it, and you burn an effigy of a child. Very similar to what they do at the Bohemian Grove, but the difference is the Owl of Alexa dates back to the Egyptians, Alexandria or Alexa, whereas Moloch, it's I believe a Canaanite deity. Some people also refer to it as Baal, B-A''A''L. But, you know, I mean, if you look back at, you know, most religions and stuff, they're all very derivative. You know, a lot of Christianity was taken from a lot of pagan religions, and, you know, do as the pagans do, because they were trying to get people to join their religion and things like that. So you see a lot of very similar things going on from Christianity, early Judaism, and, you know, and it pretty much just to make the holidays really line up with most people. It's almost like a marketing scheme, really, when it comes to all that kind of stuff. So I could see how over the years there has been a lot of confusion, and I believe that the occult secret societies that continue to do these Druidic rites of, like, you know, the Freemasons and these secret societies, they like how confusing it is, because it's easy to discredit. Anything, any information that you have, you could be like, oh, no, you're confusing this with that, and you don't know what you're talking about. It's very easy to deny something that is so ambiguous and so obscure.
In 2011, the first year that I went to the Grove protests, there was a man there, an older gentleman, and he was discussing how that he was a reporter for, I believe he said, the Press Democrat in Santa Rosa. And he said that he had written an article, tongue-in-cheek, that kind of compared the ceremony of the cremation of care to a Moloch ceremony. And he told everyone there that that Jones used that in citation. I don't have his name. I kind of vaguely recall some type of article flashed up in some documentary, maybe. I regret not getting his information, but you know, for what it's worth, that was said to us. Very interesting. For whatever reason, for if he got in there and he filmed it for the way he said he did, Mary Moore's people got him in there. They publicly regret it. And for years they always cite, he's a crazy person, Moloch, blah blah blah, and focus on the Lakeside talks. That's where it's important. And I agree that the Lakeside talks are very important, and we have unbelievable information about that stuff. But for whatever reasons these things happen, the whole Moloch thing, as it goes, it detracts from, literal cases that aren't, mainstream understood, like Paul Benassi. You have something as horrible and terrible as the Paul Benassi story, and then you have Jones come out doing Moloch, and then everyone can say, oh, Moloch, that's ridiculous. And anytime you bring up Paul Benassi, then they just cite Moloch. In my experience, it's very frustrating for me as a researcher that people only go up to a certain point, and they're not very malleable in looking at the evidence. And you're right.
Yeah, I have a theory about that. I feel like the majority of humanity, I think it takes a really special kind of person that is definitely a minority to be a critical thinker in this day and age, to understand the nuance and the complexity of our reality and how nothing is black and white. I believe we have all been programmed to think in a very binary manner. And I actually did a lecture series at the Florida International University for a couple of years. And I even presented it at 2600 Magazine's Hackers of Planet Earth, the HOPE conference for, hackers, crackers, and all sorts of information security experts and things like that. Jello Biafra was there, and a lot of ex-CIA people and stuff. And my theory on the whole thing is the people, the powers that be, the people that run the countries, governments, corporations, they've made it a point. And I believe that the secret societies are the ones really behind the curtain of all of this. And the policy, the talks, the ideas, they want people to think in a binary yes or no manner. They want people to either pick a Republican or a Democrat. And then the way they program this is with like football, baseball, basketball. Well, you got Team A versus Team B. And what do? They go onto the gridiron or simulated warfare, and they fight it out. And then that is how they program us. Sports is really important for this. They program us to think about us and them. And then there's nothing in the middle. And that's why if you are a libertarian or an independent, or you want to support the Green Party or any other third party, what happens? Oh, you're just taking votes away from our side. It's us versus them always. It's U.S. versus Russia right now. That's what they're continuing to push. The Democrats, of course. And then meanwhile, the Republicans, they're gatekeeping in their own way. And I think we're in an interesting time where people are starting to realize this and doing their own research. And that's why it's so important what you guys are doing, what Greg is doing, what Dark Docs is attempting to do. Before Dark Docs, we had federaljack.com, and one of our campaigns was writeitin2008.com, and we made it a point to point out everything wrong with Hillary Clinton, everything wrong with John McCain, everything wrong with Barack Obama, and highlight Cynthia McKinney, Ralph Nader, Dennis Kucinich, and all of these third-party candidates that were actually just, trying to give an alternative which I think is very important. What happens is that, again, you have the Democrats and the Republicans shooting it down, and they have the same argument. They say, if you vote for a third party, you're simply just taking votes away from us. And that scares people into groupthink, into herd mentality, and everyone wants to win. Like, they don't care if they're right or wrong, they just want to win. So you go for the biggest team. And that has been a detriment to our society. And that's the problem with democracy. And in my opinion, that's why I believe that the Founding Fathers made us a federal republic. That is why we have an electoral college system. So that way, when everyone's voting, one person, one vote doesn't work because it's mob mentality. And then what's going to end up happening is the states with the highest population, like New York and California, based on what they vote, that's who the president is going to be. So the other 48 states don't matter in a democracy. And that is why we need to keep our electoral college. We need to keep our federal republic, and that is going to maintain the balance. What's the old adage? Democracy is two wolves and a sheep voting on what's for dinner, whereas a constitutional republic is a well-armed sheep contesting the votes. Yeah, sorry if I have a little background noise on my end. We were at a pool. There was a pool party a lot of our friends were at, and, Mother's Day and such. Happy Mother's Day for all you mothers listening out there. And it started raining, so then I started walking in this direction, and then some kids were yelling, so I walked in that direction, and then there was a fountain that was very loud, so I apologize if I have any unwanted noise or any wind blowing in my phone. I'm OTG. I'm not in front of a computer right now. I'm on my cell phone, so soon we will have new microphones for this operation. And that brings us to our next point. If you see value in these kinds of transmissions, we have no advertisers other than, of course, Eternal Affairs Media, or rather Blog Talk Radio, and their advertisers. But we could use any support that you would like to give our way. As they say on the No Agenda show, it's Value for Value Network, which means that if you see value in this and you feel that it was valuable to you, can you put a dollar amount on that? Maybe you could spare $1 or $2. Maybe if you're like, man, thank you so much for talking about the stuff that the mainstream media is not talking about. You know what? I can afford $50. You know what? I just got a raise at my job, and I could throw you $500. Anything that you give to us, we're going to take that money, and then we're going to not work for someone else to pay the bills, and because now we're working for you. And then we will continue to bring out new podcasts. DarkDocs.com is currently working on a new full-length documentary film that keeps getting longer and longer as I'm editing the thing, that it might even turn into a mini-series about exposing Pedo Swim, about how Adult Swim and Justin Roiland, Dan Harmon, the creators of Rick and Morty, have been putting out pedophilic cartoon and snuff films where they are encouraging people to have what they call natural and consensual relationships with children. And some of their content includes rape, murder, and all sorts of stuff. We have all kinds of terrible clips. And there's a lot of occult symbolism that they throw in there. I personally believe that they are Satanists. And that's just not a speculation. They throw a lot of occult symbols into their stuff, and I don't think it's an accident. So, we spend a lot of time looking at what people do, what people are trying to put out into the public, especially within the view of children. And on the Dark Docs network on Facebook, as long as we can exist there, we've been exposing pedophile grooming, pedophile networks within social media and within advertising campaigns. Right now, there's a poster up in Toronto subways that shows 3 naked men having sex with each other. Anybody, on the subways can see this thing, and it links to a website called thesexyouvant.ca. And if you go to this website, it's nothing but cartoons of like really hardcore pornography. And anyone can go to this. It doesn't have any 18 or over kind of thing like most bars or alcohol or cigarette companies might have. So anyone can look at this hardcore cartoon pornography, as well as on Vimeo.com, all of Justin Roiland's stuff that we got from for our documentary. They are just putting this stuff in the view of children. Children can navigate to this stuff. If you're a fan of Rick and Morty, it doesn't take long when you're on YouTube or any website to be redirected to this kind of terrible stuff. So it is our job that we have taken it upon ourselves to expose this stuff, to call it out for what it is, and hopefully we will have some sort of legal standing at some point once enough awareness has been raised on the topics to outlaw these guys and hold these criminals to justice, because that's exactly what they are. Anyone pushing for sex with minors, adults having sex with minors, you're a criminal. I mean, that's a criminal act, and if you're advocating for it, that makes you a criminal. So that's what we do here. We make sure to protect the next generations from being molested, essentially, because it's a vicious cycle. You find the majority of children that have been molested, they end up kind of going into that. That's what happened to Paul Benassi. It's a vicious cycle. You get molested, the power is taken away from you, and then when you become an adult, you want to regain that power, and sometimes, if you're damaged enough, you will then injure another child, and it will keep going. We want to stop this vicious cycle from happening by raising awareness and letting people know that this is not okay. Child drag shows are not okay. They are not acceptable behavior within our modern society. And they're working really hard to make sure that your children are going to become cross-dressing prostitutes for the elite. And they will end up at the Bohemian Grove and having sex with adult men. And that is not okay. So please, if you think that these have value, these shows have value, consider donating. With that being said, any notes from Greg, and then we can hear the next annal from Brendan.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, that's much better.
Sound great.
All right. My whole computer just crashed, but thankfully I had I'm on my cell phone, so that's okay. I'm gonna try to log back in.
Yeah, your cell phone sounds much better than your computer. That's for sure.
Okay. All right. I'm just gonna stay on the cell phone anyways, but I want to just make sure. Yeah. Anyways, now the only thing that I was gonna say is in the book number 4, volume 4 of the Bohemian Grove books here on page 161, it does mention that there is a play of the actual Buddha statue. So I'm going to look more into that. That's all I wanted to say just on that.
Oh, great. You did find something. That's fantastic. Yeah, because I always wondered why they would have a Buddha there, of all things.
Yeah.
Good find, Greg.
All right, great. Well, we're going to have a couple more of these Bohemian Grove special edition episodes gearing up to the midsummer cremation of care ceremony, where we're all going to be meeting again in person 1 year later. And if you guys want to see what we shot and what you guys, the amazing footage, our documentary would be nothing without your mini documentaries all interwoven into it. It's like Inception of documentaries. At darkdocs.com, Sacred Owls, They Are Here to Save the World, is available on DVD, $13. We will ship it to you anywhere in the world. Sometimes you're far enough that the shipping alone costs more than $13, but we're happy to eat those costs because we're happy that you want a copy of our DVD. If you buy 2 of them, you get 1 free, and that's how we roll. And we're going to be putting out DVDs of all of our original content, but that DVD in particular has footage shot at the Bohemian Grove protests from 2012, 2014 and 2016 when you guys visited. and commentary, meeting with staff at the Grove and their perspectives on what we do, and you know, it's really interesting how even people that work there, they act like they don't know anything, but I think they know a little bit more than they let on. That's for sure.
Just teasing us. They're teasing us with it.
They love it. They love that you guys come out there, and I mean, I think, you know, it would be an otherwise very boring job if you guys didn't show up.
Yeah, I agree.
The one guy on the
we
golf
just
cart back in 2016, he used to work for the Secret Service. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Tony.
Yes. Tony was Secret Service for Gerald Ford. He was there when Ford was shot at twice.
Wow.
Interesting
So
guy,
he
that
says.
Tony. So he said.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
he said. Well, it was.
They're a bunch of liars.
He wasn't elected. Yeah, the debauchery of the Bohemian Grove.
Yeah,
Something else.
I'm not gonna lie. I like to have a couple beers, you know, get loose.
Yeah.
I'm drinking one of these spiked agua frescas, sparkling cucumber lime. It contains 4% alcohol. It's like the seltzers, you know, the flavored seltzers, but like they're spiked. You know, you got a little booze in there. And, you know, I would probably enjoy, you know, hanging out at the Bohemian Grove with some of these assholes and whatever. But the fact that, like, their bosses, the people in the highest echelons of this stuff, these are the people that are, again, making foreign policy that is funding the military-industrial complex, that is funding the drones that are dropping bombs on innocent women and children, men, you know, all over the third world. And they do this for depopulation. They do this to kill innocent people because they want their oil. They want their land, and they don't care about you. They want you dead.
They
and
sure
that's what it comes down to.
This is a perfect segue into Lakeside Talks.
Yeah.
I'll get back to cremation another time. This is good. This is written by Bohemian Kevin Starr in the Annals, Volume 7, 87 to 1996. Most notoriety, one suspects, attaching itself to the annual encampment derives from the Lakeside Talks. From the Lakeside podium over the years, heads of state and former heads of state of various nations, literary and musical figures, captains of industry, scholars and university leaders, artists, diplomats, scientists, and just plain bohemians have filled their allotted 30 minutes, in most instances, with wise and pithy discourse. Like everything else in the Grove, the Lakeside Talks is governed by ritual and protocol. In the year preceding the encampment, the Lakeside Committee meets periodically in the City Club and draws up its list of speakers. Some, but not all, speakers are Bohemians. Others are guests of Bohemians scheduled to attend the coming encampment. Still others are expressively invited by the Board of Directors at the request of Lakeside Committee to attend the encampment and give a Lakeside talk. From whatever source, Bohemian or guest, a full array of speakers is scheduled by May or June at the latest for each day of the encampment. While every encampment day is equal as far as Lakeside Talks is concerned, some encampment days, especially weekend days, are more equal than others, given the fact that these days witness a larger population in the Grove. Hence, a general pattern of subject matter has emerged in Lakeside Talks. Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday are reserved for more specialized topics. That way, Bohemians who wish to stay through midweek to hear a particular Lakeside talk may do so. On Thursday, the scope of talk widens, edging into questions of politics, diplomacy, and public affairs, which tend to dominate weekend presentations. Sunday talks are usually reserved for more philosophical subjects. The last Saturday, by tradition, is reserved for a distinguished speaker who is asked to give a talk addressing the big picture, the long-range issues in his field of expertise. Thus, the last Saturday and the Sunday talks are the most philosophical and have accounted for some of the most memorable lakeside talks ever given in the Grove. The extent and manner of presentation at lakeside talks is equally controlled. From noon to 12:30, there is an organ concert. Noon usually finds the lakeside relatively empty, with a scattered figure or two lolling on the lawn, should it be a sunny day. By 12:20 or so, a considerable crowd is gathered as Bohemians converge from throughout the Grove to the lakeside. The scene is most impressive. Midday light, for one thing, makes the green of the overhead trees seem more green, even more shimmering. The lake itself is a riot of green and colored water flowers. Dragonflies skim above the surface of the lake, and depending on the vagaries of their humor, a chorus of frogs can be heard in all its Aristophanean splendor. By 12:25 or so, the speaker will have arrived, as well as most of the Bohemians attending the event. If the day is sunny, protocol allows for Bohemians to doff their shirts, lie on the grass, and indulge in a half hour's heliotherapy. At the 1996 encampment, Governor Pete Wilson remarked that he had hoped that it would be a cloudy day, so that he might avoid the necessity of speaking to a sea of hairy armpits. If the speaker is a noted celebrity, a former president, if the speaker is a noted celebrity, a former president, perhaps a well-known movie star, a nationally ranked journalist, a cluster of kibitzers might have already formed around him. At precisely 12:30, the organ concert ends, and a member of the Lakeside Committee moves to the podium and calls for a round of applause for the organist. The Lakeside Committeeman then introduces the day's speaker. Introductions are brief and to the point. Upon being introduced, the speaker will stride from somewhere in the vicinity of the organ to the podium and begin his talk, which concludes promptly at 1 o'clock. Following the talk and the applause, the speaker will then mix informally with Bohemians for informal discussion. Now, we know that in 1988, the former head of the FBI and then CIA director gave a lakeside chat in which he says, "But we have had a number of major successes this year." And then in the copy of the speech, which was put out by the CIA in a FOIA request, following that sentence, it's all redacted. So, what the hell?
Right, and these lakeside chats go so much further. I mean, the Manhattan Project was first discussed at the Grove, from what I understand. Is that correct?
Yes.
So these people have been developing nuclear weapons in order to murder billions of people here at the Grove. It's not just a frat. It's not just sophomoric cavorting of intellectuals and, just blowing off steam, but they are actually talking about real policy. They are actually talking about destroying lives.
In the annals, they give a year, it gives it year by year, and it tells you what topics were discussed and by who. It's pretty amazing. If you'd like, I'd like to go through 1988 to 1991. I think there's some good stuff here.
Please do.
Ready for that? All right. The 1988 encampment enjoyed an equal array of interesting lectures. Bohemian director Tom Terrell discussed the Chautauqua movement, a talk later published in library notes. Hoover Institution scholar Martin Anderson discussed the power of ideas in revolutionary situations. Former Secretary of the Air Force Thomas Reed evaluated the SDI initiative. Financier Edward Reagan outlined the tremendous power exercised by pension funds in the American investment market. Chronicle musical critic Robert Commenday discussed the parameters and obligations of criticism. Scientist Bernard Oliver weighed the possibilities of extraterrestrial life. CIA Director Judge William Webster evaluated his organization in light of the contemporary world situation. Smithsonian historian and curator Joseph Korn III probed the question of how museums should treat the machine. Bancroft Library Director James D. Hart outlined the origins of his institution. Physician Henry Ritter separated facts from fiction regarding the prostate. Historian Stephen Ambrose evaluated the career of Dwight D. Eisenhower. Robert Merkel evoked the war on drugs. On the final Saturday, veteran corporate sage Ed Littlefield, tongue slightly in cheek, asked Bohemians if they were still enjoying the corporate climb. That was 1988. 1989, Lakeside witnessed an equally impressive array of talent. Astronaut Frank Borman talked on the future of manned spaceflight. Media expert Louis Bucardi, the media and politics. Foundation activist William Huddunt, competition and compassion in these United States. Developer Arthur Davis, the super sports arenas. Novelist Alan Drury, Advise and Consent. Artist activist Leonard Kingsley, the museum scene in San Francisco. Pundit Roald Sagdeep, Whither the Soviet Union? United States Air Force General John Chain, the Strategic Air Command. Lawyer William Koblenz, the value of regional government. Museum of Modern Art Director John Lane, Modern Art. Banker Louis Coleman, Third World Debt. Editor, columnist, novelist William F. Buckley Jr. spoke on Whittaker Chambers. And publisher Malcolm Forbes on competition. That was 89. 1990. U.S. Senator Alan Simpson opened the 1990 encampment with a discussion on the obligations of citizenship. Admiral Bobby Inman balanced the question of arms control with the changes occurring in Russia. Howard Putnam discussed management in the times of stress. San Francisco Fine Arts Museum Director Harry S. Parker III addressed his favorite topic, museums and art. Undersea explorer Robert Ballard quite naturally discussed undersea exploration. And Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia asked the question of how one might judge judges. Former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger discoursed on American foreign policy. Admiral William Crowe probed the balance of power. Historians Charles Longsworth used a discussion of colonial Williamsburg to address the larger question of how does one make history live. Organ maker Jack Bethers discussed the revival of great organs, outdoor and indoor, in the United States. Physician Henry Ryder Jr. asked a simple question, impotence. Who needs it? Scientist Tom Lovejoy asked Bohemians to consider the endangered condition of tropical rainforests in the Amazon. On the last Saturday, Stanford philosopher John Gardner asked the Bohemians to consider the issues behind the issues. Here's my favorite one, 1991. The 1991 encampment opened with a flourish as Mikhail Tatuta, San Francisco bureau chief for Soviet television, shared his observations on the United States. The compliment was returned the next day when Oberlin President Frederick Starr asked the question, USSR, smaller but better? Media specialist William Armstrong followed with a discussion of congressional reform. Stanford professor of economics Roger Noll investigated the future of the sports business, while UC Berkeley Vice President Emeritus Earl Bolton asked the Bohemians to consider the mystery of laughter. Academic dominance of the Lakeside Podium continued with Stanford medical professor Robert Gimplis assessing the question of whether or not anyone could afford medicine in the United States by the year 2000. As if in reply, the next day, a Thursday, former HEW Secretary Joseph Califano attempted to answer Gimplis's question with a discussion of medical economics. Civil rights activist Vernon Jordan followed with a talk entitled The Coming Revolution. Former West German Chancellor Helmut Schmidt addressed the enormous problems of the 21st century. Former New York Public Library President Barton Gregorian, recently appointed president of Brown University, dissected the question of an American individualism the following day. Former Attorney General Elliot Richardson asked Bohemians to consider the New World Order, and Gilbert Grosvenor, president and board chairman of National Geographic Society, urged why America must get an A in geography and how you can help.
Hold on, I'm gonna pause you there.
Yep.
What was the one about accepting the New World Order? Who was saying that one?
That was former Attorney General Elliot Richardson.
Okay, a couple of things. Do you have that in that animal? Like, are you reading like a table of contents kind of thing there?
I'm reading the summary of what took place by year, topic-wise. I will try to find that, actually.
Yeah, I would like to. I would like you to, if not on this episode, maybe if you can find it for the next episode. Like, I would like to see what their sales pitch is for accepting the New World Order. Now, I mean, I'm sure anyone listening to this show is familiar. That's the term for global governance. That is what the League of Nations, that then became the United Nations, it was their goal to have a one world government, a one world currency, and a one world religion was discussed under this concept of a New World Order, which there was a book by H.G. Wells, the creator of The Time Machine and War of the Worlds, of course, made him famous. He wrote a book, The New World Order. And then Adolf Hitler, he wrote a book, The New World Order as well, talking about this same concept of a one world government where we all live under it. So I'm just curious to see what they said. Also, what perked my ears up is, of course, you have former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger, which he wrote the National Security Study Memorandum 200 in 1979, which called for depopulation of the third world, spelled out and specifically broken down on how you can pull off killing billions of people to maintain a number. Pretty much 10% of the world can live in this New World Order. 90% plus of humanity must die through war, famine, and poison. And if you read, we have it at darkdocs.com, the NSSM 200, National Security Study 200, 1979, from Henry Kissinger. And what's really important about this document is that's exactly what's been happening since 1979. You have war. We have countless war under George W. Bush, and Dick Cheney. They said this would be a 30-year war, and some said it would be an endless war. We will always be at war with Eurasia. We will never be at war with Eurasia, as they said in 1984 from I'm drawing a blank here. Aldous Huxley wrote Brave New World. Who wrote George Orwell, yes.
George Orwell.
And, of course, yeah, we have to maintain a constant state of war in order to continue the budget spending, the military-industrial complex. 9/11, the 7/7 bombings were used as pretext for war in order to go into Iraq, Afghanistan, Iran, and we continue these war efforts. And then, then everyone got sick of W and all of the death and all of the war. And then they will throw in a Democrat. They threw in Barack Obama, which continued the same policies. The Patriot Act. He signed Patriot Act 2. He signed the National Defense Authorization Act and continued to strip civil liberties of American citizens while continuing to bomb people overseas. And then he brought in drone strikes. He authorized us not even showing up on our own, but bringing Skynet-style robots to kill people in other countries. Now that's the war. Famine. We have been putting sanctions on countries, unprovoked, to make sure that they don't get the food, they don't get the clean water. Once they have water filtration systems in place for their communities, we hire military groups and private mercenaries and like Blackwater to go over there and bomb their clean water facilities in order to make sure that they have dirty water that is contaminated with sewage that will continue to make them sick and die. And then there's poison. You want to push fluoride into the water supply, just like the Nazis did. The Nazi scientists at IG Farben, which became Bayer Pharmaceutical. Now, Bayer Pharmaceutical are the ones who make aspirin. They're the ones who make your MMR vaccines that are being pushed on you, and they're making, trillions of dollars off of your ignorance and scaring you into, getting these measles vaccines that will give you measles, but a whole lot more. There's cadmium, all kinds of heavy metals in these vaccines, and you don't even know what's going in them because they're constantly changing the formula, and it's proprietary to make sure that even if you ask for the insert and they, the doctors will be like, I don't know what you're talking about. Don't be an anti-vaxxer. We're pumping these things into our kids, and it's all being carried out. And Henry Kissinger has been pushing for this new world order with a depopulation agenda using war, famine, and poison. Also, you mentioned Helmut Schmidt, which is the German chancellor. I believe he is at one time he was the president of the European Central Bank, and he is also a member of the Bilderberg Group. And Sacred Owls, in our very first EP, we had a song called Hell's Bells where we talked about all of these guys at Bilderberg and how in the Alex Jones film Endgame, Blueprint for Global Enslavement, they were protesting the Bilderberg Group. And you had, again, Henry Kissinger, Helmut Schmidt, David Rockefeller, Queen Beatrix of the Netherlands, all getting together to try to see how they can market this new world order. And that was the founding of the European Union. That was the attempt at the North American Union, which failed, which is fantastic. But, the infrastructure's there, and they're going to continue to push it. The next time that there's a Democrat in office, they're going to continue to push for open borders to Mexico and Canada. And, of course, I love my brothers and sisters in Mexico and Canada. In fact, Sacred Owls is playing our very first international show in Juarez, Mexico, on this tour in July. You can see more information on that at sacredowls.com. But we need to have borders. And the reason why is because if you just have open borders and people just coming and going as they want, you have no idea how to maintain the infrastructure of your citizens. You have no idea how to provide for these citizens because there's no accountability. And we are a sovereign state. We are the United States, and we are not part of any kind of union because consolidation of power is going to enslave us. We need to maintain our national sovereignty. So does Mexico, and so does Canada. We can have alliances. We can work together for common goals, but we need to stay independent. Because what's going to happen is once you have an North American Union, and you have your European Union, which is a catastrophe, might I add. That's what Brexit is all about, and how every time everyone votes against the European Union, they have a revote because your votes don't matter over there, and your votes don't even matter over here. If they don't like the way you guys are voting, guess what? They're going to throw the elections. And once we have all these unions, we're going to go to war. There's going to be a war against the North American Union and the European Union, and everyone's going to be sick of that war, and, you know, we're going to have record numbers of deaths, and then the only solution is for us all to just consolidate under the United Nations is going to take over, and you're going to have the blue helmets. You're going to have, you know, UN troops on our streets telling us what to do. And that is what pretty much is the premise of the film Gray State that never got released. And the creator of the film is believed to be in a staged murder-suicide where him, his wife, and his daughter were killed. And we're going to be talking about that on Tuesday with one of the co-creators of the trailer and working on the film, as well as Greg Fernandez, who has been looking at what you have been doing on this topic, and I mean you've put in some time. You have something like 40 episodes, breaking down the crime scene photos, and I mean it's amazing how much work you've put into researching this, and I can't wait to hear your deconstruction of what you think actually happened, in this atrocity, to try to silence the independent media and warning people against these ideas and what's happening.
So that's been the biggest challenge with it. And yeah, I look forward to that. I can give you a little spoiler if you want a spoiler right now.
Yes.
The spoiler.
Yeah, I don't want to say too much because I want to plug it. I want to get people stoked about it. I'm excited, but I can't wait for this episode. And I'm going to be sitting in front of my computer because I apparently picked the worst place possible to do a podcast because there has been an airplane overhead every 30 seconds. I have to put on mute, while I'm listening to you guys. I think we must be right next to an airport because this is ridiculous. I've never seen so many airplanes. The good news is I don't see any chemtrails today, which is odd. I think they took Mother's Day off. They're like, let's not kill our mothers for one day. No chemtrails today, guys. Because usually here in Central Florida, we're right by the Patrick's Air Force Base, and our sky is riddled in just like, it looks like tic-tac-toe up in the sky all the time here. I mean, wow. I'm surprised I'm not autistic. Maybe I am autistic. I don't know. But yeah, today they took the day off. There's no chemtrails in the sky today. So that's fantastic. Those mothers and their mother lovers. That's right.
But you
they think that by taking a day off, it's going to save their mom because they're idiots,
Yeah, well, nothing's gonna save them like that. But
you know what's going to save them? We're going to save them. We're going to save them. We're saving the day right now. We're doing it.
I've
done.
Put my trust in God. Yeah, I hope God will save them. That's they need to figure that out. But
I like God, but I think he took the day off, so I think it's our job. We're working for God.
Well,
he took the day off. God took the day off. We're working for him. We're doing God's work.
I've never seen God take a day off. Never seen him take it off. But he does.
Well, there was that seventh day, right? He worked for 6 days, and then on the seventh day, he took the day off. We're still on that seventh day. That seventh day is actually all we've been living.
I would debate you on that, but sure. Because
we're going to have an episode about how this is the seventh day or not. That's a great episode.
Church on the seventh day. Here we go. Okay.
Yep. Sunday, day of rest.
Shoma
Shabbos.
It's all relevant.
That's right.
I stay away from all that.
I
love it.
I want to expand on the talks in '91. Not only did we have Richardson talking about the New World Order and, you know, how important it is.
Oh, I love that guy.
But a couple of
I love
days
him.
later, yeah, he's a good guy.
Oh yeah, he's great. He's awesome.
A couple of days later, the then Secretary of Defense, Richard Cheney, had more pressing problems on his mind as he addressed major defense problems of the 21st century. Now,
Oh.
PNAC, right? So he had a nice discussion about PNAC. And then a couple days later, same year, former Secretary of State.
I'm going to
George
stop you
Shultz.
right there, and I hate to keep
Yeah.
interrupting, but, like, you know, we
No.
throw around terms like PNAC, like everyone knows
Yeah.
what that means. That is an acronym for the Project for the New American Century, a think tank founded by William Criswell, a neoconservative, I guess you could call him a philosopher, a political pundit. And in this Project for a New American Century think tank, you have people contributing like Francis Fukuyama, you have Dick Cheney, Donald Rumsfeld, Condoleezza Rice. I'm sure these names all sound very familiar because they were all part of George W. Bush's cabinet when he was the President of the United States, of course, during 2001 when 9/11 happened. So,
Yes,
you know, if
we
you
gotta
look at this
point
Project
out-
for a New... I'm sorry?
We got to point out that this speech was given in 1991.
Yeah, so this is literally 10 years before 2001. And then a Project for a New American Century document, Rebuilding America's Defenses, came out, I believe, in either 1999 or 2000. I think it came out in 99. And then in 2000, they added a couple things. There was some addendums. And we have that document, again, at darkdocs.com. You can look that up. And if you look at page 91, it calls for a new catalytic event, like a new Pearl Harbor, in order to gather public support in order to rebuild America's defenses. 1 year later, 9/11 happens, and we did exactly that.
Yes. Like,
So in 91, what were they talking about with PNAC there?
just says Major Defense Problems of the 21st Century by Dick Cheney. The following speaker,
Wow.
the big speaker that they closed the whole thing with, was former Secretary of State George Shultz, and he then was a fellow at the Hoover Institution, and he closed the encampment with Agenda for America. Now, we've slowly gotten a few of these talks. We have a couple of them. We'll keep looking. We'll find them.
Yeah, I really want to hear the Dick Cheney one because, I mean, this is a guy that he ran on the morning of 9/11. He essentially ran a drill with the North American Air Defense, NORAD, called Valiant Warrior. And in this drill, they were scrambling, jets from NORAD to different locations, including the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. And at the same time, allegedly, we had these hijacked public airliners, where people who have been identified as people who have had ties to the State Department, including, of course, Osama bin Laden, CIA, State Department codename Tim Osman, who was a member of the Mujahideen, the freedom fighters, back in the 70s. If you watch the film Charlie Wilson's War starring Tom Hanks, they talk all about this and how the United States gave money for arms, for bombs, for the freedom fighters to fight the Russians back in the 70s. Because it was a bleeding heart kind of thing. They went over there, they saw that these kids are getting blown up and this and that, and they painted the whole thing as like oh, we were just like helping fighting those dirty communists, Russian yada yada. But at the end of the day, no, we were funding terrorists. We were funding people that were running terrorist campaigns that were doing the same thing to people over there. And so it was a back and forth that it wasn't the United States' problem. We were spending our money for other people's problems. And, they called it nation building. It's not nation building. It's empire. It's our Anglo-Saxon American WASPy empire building that we've been working on this whole time. It's all for control, for power, for oil, for resources, for lands. And again, like these people, they're talking about a new world order. How can we push a new world order on these people? Oh, well, we'll just act like we're helping everybody, and we're actually just trying to take over the world, just like, every other psychotic, power-hungry empire since the dawn of mankind. And go ahead.
President Nixon in 1992 gave a lakeside talk, and it was the need to assist democracy in Russia. Now, wow, right?
Yeah, why is that our problem? Why are a bunch of guys meeting in California, United States, talking about how we're going to push democracy, which we're not even a democracy? I'm sick of people. Every time I hear someone say, this is a democracy, this is an attack on our democracy, I want to punch them in the mouth because they are a fucking liar. They are spreading disinformation about our federal republic. I'll say it again. I'm not a Republican, but you cannot deny, if you look up what kind of government the United States of America is, we're not a democracy. We have the democratic ideals, in some parts of our governments, but by definition, our country is a federal republic. We're a federation of states, independent sovereign states, and we work together under a federal government, under our federal republic. We are not a democracy. And so why are we pushing something that we're not even on a country that we should have no power over?
Yeah. And it ties into our experience a few years ago when, it's like 1 o'clock in the afternoon and this tall dude in a really nice suit walks out, and he's this Italian diplomat, and he's telling us that he is one of 5 Bay Area consulates asked to be, present for this lakeside talk. Now, I'm thinking maybe those are NATO countries because he's from Italy. I don't know. But he said that the talk was how to deal with Vladimir Putin. Yeah. He looked
Vlad the Impaler.
He looked a bit freaked out. He was very, he comes out, he sees us, he asks us what we're doing there. We told him, hey, we don't care too much for what's happening in Syria. We don't like the banking structure, a couple things, And he's like, oh, wow, you'd really hate it in there because that's everything that is in there, And he told us he didn't know what the Grove even was until they told him that he's going to go there. Crazy. And, he then he told us that, and then, he was just like, have a good day. He walked away.
I love it. They act like they don't know. Oh, no, I got an invite in, my email, so I just I flew across the world to show up to this thing. I have no idea what it is. You know goddamn well what you're going to. You know what you're doing. You know what you're a part of. You know who you are, and you know you're the enemy, and that's why you're lying to us.
Yeah, it was unprecedented that he came out and said that to us. Wow.
Yep. It's brazen. They just because they think you're dumb. They think you are like everyone else that watches their CNBC and their Fox News and their CNN, and if you're next level, you're watching Russia Today and more independent media outlets, and Still, they don't talk about this stuff on there. They don't talk about the Bilderberg Group. They don't talk about the Club of Rome. They don't talk about the Council on Foreign Relations, the World Federalist Organization. You need to look these up, people. You need to, in fact, a great resource on darkdocs.com, if you haven't already, and I would imagine most of you have not, because I know people in the truth community, I would even argue maybe even you two haven't even listened to all of William Cooper's work on Mystery Babylon and secret societies. Have you guys been listening to the Hour of the Time? Did you guys ever catch any of those?
I caught a couple.
It's fantastic. If you go under audio on darkdocs.com, also houroftetime.com is the official website run by the children of William Cooper, who was a podcaster. He's one of the first podcasters back in, the late 80s, early 90s. He wrote the book Behold a Pale Horse, which talks about all of this, the Bohemian Grove, secret societies, their origins, what they're about, what are their common goals, what do they all have in common. And his podcast, Hour of the Time, is a great resource, and it's all in the public domain. It's all open source, and that's why we were able to download the whole archive and re-upload it to our website. And we got complete permission to share all of this. No advertisement. We got a lot of our ethos as a broadcasting network to have the Eternal Affairs Media. They have ads. They have a lot of overhead. They're the reason why we're on Blog Talk Radio right now talking about this. But darkdocs.com, we host our own site. We pay the bills, and we refuse to have any advertisers, because once you have advertisers, you have people telling you what to do. You have people that say, if you can't say this, and if you do say this, we will deplatform you. And that's what's happening on Facebook. That's what's happening on Twitter. And it's what's going to continue to happen. And the only way for you to have real free speech, of course, there's new free, social media platforms that claim to have real free speech, like Mew. We just jumped on Mew. So you can look up Dark Docs and Sacred Owls on there. But, we'll see how long that lasts and if they get compromised, because everyone, seems to eventually be like, they want to get bought out. You have a lot of these podcast networks that are trying to have subscription services, and you have to pay, like Netflix, $10 a month or whatever it is for you to listen to podcasts. And then they still have advertisements. I got really frustrated. Hulu, for example, you pay Hulu $10, $14 a month, whatever it is. And, Netflix, they don't have any advertisements, but Hulu, it's about the same price. And now they still have commercial breaks that you can't fast forward through. You can't stop. You have to watch them. So now you are paying for a monthly service, and then you have to pay for your internet and, your electric bill and all that stuff. And then they're still going to throw advertisements at you, and it's only going to get worse because their platform doesn't work. A for-profit media conglomerate is not a profitable venture, and they know that, and they're drowning, and they're going to go bankrupt in no time. Mark my words. We've all been predicting it. However, darkdocs.com, I don't care if no one donates. I don't care. I mean, of course, I would love the more people that donate, we'll have more shows for you. We'll have more documentaries. We'll have more time to. Right now, what you see on darkdocs.com is about 2%, and that number is actually dropping because we keep getting new content. People keep sending us new amazing videos they're putting out on YouTube and this and that, and those videos are getting blocked and banned and pulled, flagged, and you can't watch them. Once they upload them, you might be able to see it for like a week or so, and then they'll find something wrong with it, and they will pull that video, and you will no longer be able to see it. So they send it to us, we download their videos, and we upload them to our server, and we will never pull them. And in fact, every time YouTube blocks or bans a video, excuse me, we have a little badge of honor that says banned on YouTube. So every now and then you'll see a thumbnail image on the website that has a little like a YouTube frowny face, and it says banned on YouTube, and we wear that like a badge of honor because that means that video just became exclusive to YouTube and exclusive to darkdocs.com unless someone else is doing what we're doing, and we encourage you to do that too. We want you to compete with us. I want you to make a website. In fact, right now for $150, if you donate to info@darkdocs.com on PayPal, we will send you a 1 terabyte hard drive through the mail with our entire website and our entire archive. You can buy a domain name and hosting from whoever you want, upload our website, and we will not come after you. And you can change the logo, you can call it whatever you want. We want this information to stay open, free, and in the public domain. And it's up to you guys, to keep this alive. But they're going to keep coming after us. They're going to keep trying to censor us, and it's up to you to really help us spread the word. If you don't have any money to give, you can simply just share our stuff on social media. Red pill the hell out of everyone. We have stickers that, we can mail you that you can slap on stuff. So hit us up.
That's brilliant.
Damn right. That was awesome.
Oh, by the way,
I've ever
StickerGuy.com, which I'm happy to plug. They don't give us any money or anything, but StickerGuy.com has been doing our stickers for over a decade. They are having a special this month that for $36 you can get 250 metallic silver vinyl stickers with like midnight blue ink. And they always have a monthly special. So we just got the Dark Doc stickers that you guys have. Now we have them in like metallic silver and blue. They look amazing. So those are going to be coming in for this tour. And that's another way, instead of us sending this to you, you could give us a donation of like $40. That would include shipping. And then we can send you out 250 stickers for darkdocs.com. And you can slap them wherever you want.
Yeah, I'll get some resist stickers made. That sounds good.
Yeah. Resist tyranny, resist the Grove, definitely. In fact, if you guys don't have art, I'm happy to do the art for that because we need some more of those. I want resist tyranny, to definitely. It's a great domain. I mean, I love what you guys done so far, but I think it hasn't been updated since like 2017. We have a lot of stuff to update on that site as well.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. We definitely need help with that one, I think.
I'm happy. You get me the back end on that, and I'll start, going to town on it.
Nice. Very nice.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you've put together so much great stuff just on so many different topics, and I think when you think about Dark Docs, it's such a great way to just say, because and really now with this whole purge, this whole media purge, I won't be shocked if you start getting flooded with a lot of more videos that nobody else can actually host. It's definitely getting worse, and I think heading up into 2020, it's going to get a lot worse. So.
Oh yeah. Yeah, 2020 is going to be, and these guys are all into numerology. They do everything in like these they use incrementalism to just kind of like, I always use the analogy of like, the New World Order is like a scummy guy at Lover's Lane. You're the chick with your little short skirt in the convertible, right? And then like you're like, no, not right now. And they're like, oh, come on, baby, and they keep kind of slipping their hand up your skirt. And then you're like, no, and they're like, all right, fine. And then like, then they try to grab your tits. That's what the New World Order, they just constantly try to fucking get a little bit further when you keep saying no. They are the rapiest fucking people that I've ever seen. And that is exactly why Joe Biden is their front runner. Because this guy, he'll just go around grabbing people. Oh, it's okay, baby. Let's have this little photo op, and like he'll be like whispering in little girls' ears and like playing with their hair. Get the fuck off of my kid, you fucking creep. I mean, why aren't they saying that? Why? And I show these videos to people, and they're like, why are these parents just sitting there and just like smiling and laughing and that's Joe, he's like that, I'll tell you why, because these people are bought and paid for, and they understand that if you're going to play ball, if you're going to have a place at the table of the New World Order, You got to let these creeps do whatever they want to your kids. You know, if you say anything like, hey, you know, fuck off, you know, that's it. You're done. You're never going to be in the White House ever again. They will kick your ass out. You're going to lose your job. You're going to lose your house. And then you're going to get, you know, 2 shots to the back of your head, and they're going to deem it a suicide.
Well, and that's why I do think with Trump it's kind of different. I don't think it's a coincidence, and you probably know better, Christian. It doesn't seem like it's a coincidence that Donald Trump gets voted in, and now we're seeing all of these weird prostitution things that are happening. You know, all these people that are getting busted. Is that a coincidence?
Honestly, Donald Trump, when he got into office, I couldn't believe it. I mean, and I'm not a never Trumper, you know, like I don't think he was the best businessman, you know. I mean, the you know, the tax records that just got released and stuff, they tell the tale that a lot of the Democrats have been, you know, going on and on about. Yeah, sure. He's, you know, he has a kind of like venture capitalist kind of predatory marketing, you know, a business model, I guess you could call it. And, you know, it's kind of a failure. He's kind of $1 billion in the red, and then he goes bankrupt and then does a new thing and this and that. But that's neither here nor there. When I look at his foreign policy, you know, and I see the way he held himself at the United Nations, saying, hey, I'm a nationalist. I don't want your New World Order bullshit. I don't want to bow down to the UN. You know, we believe in national sovereignty. So it's like, it blows me away that they even let this guy in. I have no idea how that happened. And I mean, because, of course, I thought Hillary was going to get into office. I thought she's the establishment man. You know, she's, you know, she holds her own with the guys. You know, and what blows me away even more is like that's the New World Order candidate, right? Well, it's a woman, yet the Bohemian Grove is an all-male encampment, so she's not even allowed to go there. You know, the guys running stuff are so sexist, they won't have women there. You know, women had to have protests and fights to even get jobs there, which blows me away. Why would a woman even want to work there? But there's such a big operation in Northern California where, you know, when I talk to locals, there's no jobs, there's no economy, there's just the Bohemian Grove. And, you know, so if you are going to get a job in that area, it's going to be parking cars or giving food or whatever other services to these moguls, you know, at their like little encampments. Of course, you have the midsummer encampment, but then you have the high jinks and low jinks, and they also do like weddings and stuff on the property. We have a whole archive. The only time they let women in is like when it's privately rented out for weddings and stuff like that. But
and on
you know,
Spring Jinks, they have their whole families come. Pretty great.
So Summer Jinks, did we?
I have
Summer
pictures
Jinks
of little kids playing in front of the owl. It blows me away.
Yeah, Spring Jinks.
Yeah,
it's the creepiest damn thing I've ever seen.
June 3rd through June 9th. Spring Jinks, Bohemian Grove. If you want to go down and meet some of the wives.
Now, even for those, I mean, in order to pass through the gates, you have to, it's never open to the public, am I right? Like, there's never a time where you can just, like, as a member of the public, you have to have some sort of invitation. Your name has to be on some sort of list as a guest.
Right.
Correct.
Right.
You can be
so anybody, you know,
like
all these pictures that have been, you know, that I've seen, that a lot of them I got from, like, you know, the WikiLeaks, Guccifer archives and things like that. And so that means that, like, someone has been sharing these photos on either social media or elsewhere, and then they ended up in the public domain in order for someone to grab them, unless, like, they hack someone's email, you know, which is possible. That's how they got the Podesta emails and the Clinton emails, which you guys need to read. I mean, I'm sure you guys have read a bunch of it, but anyone listening, you got to read those Podesta emails. You got to read those Clinton emails because they are damning.
Damning.
No one's talking about it.
Damning how?
Oh, as damning against, you know, them running a pedophile ring. It's damning against them, you know, worried about going to prison, and I believe Hillary Clinton was quoted in saying that they're going to hang us all if they see what these emails have. You know, the pedophile codes being used in the John Podesta emails, the talk of pizza and handkerchiefs and hot dogs and having MAP-coded handkerchiefs and things like that. MAP is an acronym for minor attracted person. And why would you have a MAP-coded handkerchief? Why, it's like if you read these emails, they don't make any, they're like drunk texts. They don't make any sense.
Yeah, they are.
Unless you look at the FBI pedophile code, where, it's the most odd, childhood cereal box decoder ring thing that if you actually look at the FBI document on what all these words mean and you substitute the words, now it makes sense. And, I mean, there's plenty of videos we have on Dark Docs that go into great detail, email by email, with all of the reference numbers to, the actual source in WikiLeaks where you can find the original emails. And, they're very damning if you actually read them. And no one does because, I'm not going to say no one. I hate speaking in absolutes. I always default to it. But a lot of people don't because who has time for that? We do. And why do we have the time for it? Because we make the time for it. Because we have a morbid curiosity and we want to know the truth. And we're not alone. There's hundreds of thousands, if not millions of us out there that have seen these things, and we try to tell people, but there's billions of us, and the majority of people will be like, yeah, that sounds too crazy. There's no way that that's going on, so I'm just not going to believe you because I'm already depressed. Most people are like, I'm already on 5 or 6 antidepressants and psychotropic drugs, and I have to, drink myself to sleep and, smoke a couple bowls in order not to, drown myself every day. Then you throw all of this terrible stuff at them, and they're like, nah, I just want to kill myself. So I get it. I understand. And it takes a certain kind of person to detach yourself and still have a good, healthy life outside of information warfare in order to, function as a human being and not just give yourself cancer by, constantly looking at negative, terrible, horrible things,
Yes.
On that topic, I remember, Brendan and I were talking a little bit about, I really got upset a couple of episodes ago, because a couple friends of ours were talking about, how this kind of stuff, it really affects and triggers people that, have been victims of sexual abuse and things like that, that it's really important to, take a break. It's really important to not just do this all the time. Everyone has different tolerance levels. Everyone, has different amounts of time that they can spend, looking for the truth and finding, sifting through garbage, just terrible things, before it really affects them. I mean, myself included. I find there was a time in my 20s when I was doing all this stuff that I didn't know that. And I got very depressed. I got antisocial. I got negative. I could not go to a party and not talk about this stuff. 2 beers in, and I'm talking about Pizzagate and pissing everyone off at the party, and that's not okay either. There has to be a balance where certain times, certain groups of people, it's okay to talk about it, and then even within those groups, sometimes people are like, yeah, let's talk about something else. And I never argue the point, and that's very important. If someone's like, yeah, I believe you and I'm interested, but I can't right now, you really need to it's all about consent. And that's what we've always been talking about. If you care, which is what we do, we are care. We are dull care. And there's nothing dull about it. In fact, I think it's very exciting to care. And they paint it as something that, if you care, you're just, a dark cloud that enters the room, and you're like Eeyore and Winnie the Pooh, just bringing everyone down, and that's not the case. It's very exciting to be on the good side. I love it. I feel like I like to paint it as, if this is Star Wars, we're Han Solo and we're the rebels. We're fighting the Death Star, and it's fantastic. And when we win, and we will, it's going to be just this beautiful thing, a ragtag group of, the disenfranchised that wake enough people up. A lot of people say it just takes like 13% of the population to wake up to all of this stuff, to overthrow the powers that be. And we just, as human history has shown, we've just never really gotten together on a global scale and had that 13%. And we're getting very close. We have the yellow vests over in Paris, and now multiple countries all through the the falling European Union that are fighting out against their elites. We need to have our own. Good to see you. Yeah, take care. Yeah, I'll call her. Yeah. Seems like the party we're at is rounding third base. So I'm going to probably jump off the phone and let you guys finish off the show. But, just to finish my thought is that I'd say right now we have, conservatively, let's say 7 to 8% of the world's population that is maybe semi-woke in one way or another. They understand that yes, there are secret societies. Yes, there are these roundtable groups. Yes, there are these think tanks. Yes, they are the ones behind the militaries of the world that are having these coups and these false flags and these wars. And they're using the media and all their media outlets in order to have us all fight against each other. And that's why you can't get any two groups to really get together. And I think it's a beautiful and wonderful and magical thing that people like you and me and, can all get together. And even though we don't agree on everything, we have a lot of common goals. And we all just want to be free and live and let live. So, we have to continue to reach out to new people and get them to be a part of our network, start their own network, but for all of our networks to work together. And I really do think, we're coming close to a point where we can galvanize enough people to really fight back in a really meaningful way. And with that, I'll leave you. Thank you guys so much for being on the show. Thank you to all of our listeners. And you guys, I hope you can continue the dialogue. I will listen to the rest of the show tomorrow. And then we will pick it up on Tuesday with a gray stage. Thank you very much. And take care, guys.
Cheers. Great analysis, Christian.
Awesome.
Good job.
Very awesome.
Great
so
work.
now we get to hijack this show. We get to take this
We
show
do.
over. All right.
Wow.
So we can change everything now here. Hey, have you read the Mike Hansen book, The Bohemian Grove Cult of Conspiracy? Have you read this book?
I have not.
Oh man, I
want
gotta
to.
get
I'm on
you and Chris. I'm gonna get both of you guys this book. I was thinking of contacting him to see if I could get like a discounted price so I can actually pass some of these out. Because what I love about this book is it puts everything into one book, right? It puts like so many different things, and there's so many different things that he doesn't cover that we still don't know exactly about. But he kind of, it's like, what is this, like 300 pages here, almost 400 pages of just really good data. And it's really written where it's not like he's like Mike Hansen is saying, okay, this is what's happening here. This is what they're doing. He really just puts all of the different data, what this person says, what that person says, and kind of just puts it into one little neat book that you can start with. So I would say if anybody, if you're really looking for a great place to start with the Bohemian Grove stuff, I would say start here. This is a really good spot here, especially on page 212, where it does mention the Franklin cover-up. Some really good stuff. Lots of great photos in there too, And I would just say anyone who's serious about actually researching this, not someone who just wants to look at it for 10 minutes and thinks that, well, if they can't solve it for me in 10 minutes, then it's not worth my time. You know, these real things, these real cults, these real issues that we are having, that is some of the big things, because they do try to make it so complicated, so confusing that people just give up and stop looking. And so it does take a real researcher. It does take you to actually invest some time, in some real time, to treat this as a serious issue, not as entertainment, because this is not an entertaining topic. This is a serious thing. When we're talking about possibly sacrificing care, is different than possibly sacrificing people. The people that are trying to control this world, that are trying to lead us to, trying to trick us into doing what they want us to do. Those are the big issues, and that stuff takes time. So
I'd be very happy in interviewing Mr. Hansen.
All right, good, because I'm going to reach out to him and see if he would be interested in that. Man, I would love to get him out there one year. He's in Texas.
Texas.
So he's doing a lot of good things out there in Texas, and I don't know, maybe even Alex Jones. Like, why not? You know, if you want to get some mainstream media,
sit across from him and ask him a few questions. I have questions for that guy.
I have questions unrelated to the Bohemian Grove, really. But I would, it's like he's been doing this for a long time, and I think if he wants to get some media coverage that he wouldn't otherwise get, this is where you got to go. This is where it all started for him. So 19 years later, 20 years later, why not go back there? Mm-hmm. And maybe you'll get off of that most wanted list or whatever happened. That whole thing was crazy too. All these people that are getting purged, that are getting taken off of social media, some of this stuff just seems kind of like it's theater. Some of it seems like it's theater. And I know it's like a lot of people are kind of pushing me to post more about it and talk more about what is happening with Alex Jones and with those guys. But there's also a chance that these are contracts that are coming to an end, not necessarily just real researchers who just want to put out real data. So I've been having a hard time with that, and I go back and forth on many of these people because, they have to eat and they have to make a living too. But at the same time, if you're dependent on the money, if you're dependent on the crowdsourcing, on any of that, you're going to have a really hard time staying true to yourself and staying true to what actually brought you here.
Yeah.
Too many.
They don't have any problem trying to sell ads on Resist the Growth Facebook page. Like, boost this so that everybody can see it.
Yeah. Well, that's their target, but it's like, well, what are you targeting? What are you targeting for, and what is the whole purpose? I think with a lot of these people, it's like, well, what is your real purpose here? So it either gets into they're in it for money, they're in it for fame, or they're real people that are really bothered by this. And I know other times there's spiritual things where they feel called. And for me as a Christian, many times I feel called to do something. Not with every case, because you just can't. You have to pick those battles. But when we're talking about children and talking about murder and stuff like that, those things obviously hit me harder than some of the other stuff, maybe like money laundering or just political criminals, politicians doing the same thing that they've always done for years and years. You know, that stuff is not as important. The child trafficking, human trafficking, period, slavery, any
Human
of that
trafficking.
stuff. Yeah, I mean that's a big one, right? Like in the last 20 years, it just seems like it's at the forefront now, and I don't care who brought it there or what has brought us to that, but I think it's really good that more people are now talking about this. I think the whole Smallville, I don't know if you know that person from Smallville, she got busted, right? And so that case really was like, oh, okay, well maybe there is some truth to all of these people that have been talking about this for years and years. And there's many people. I mean, I don't know one person who doesn't know somebody who has been sexually abused by somebody in their past. You know, it's way too common, and nobody talks about it.
And the systemic guarding of the topic of anything improper with children or sex around the Bohemian Club or Bohemian Grove by Mary Moore's years of protesting or in newspapers. It's ridiculous. And I mean, it like for me, one of the biggest things here, you know, personally, it's a private club. They can do whatever the hell they want. I don't care. That's cool. Have fun. You're who you are. Nothing I can do to change that. You know. All right. But you know, burn an effigy of me in front of a hamster. I don't really care. You know. But honestly, you got these talks. Like I was reading that earlier, listing off these topics and these people, and then we know the world events that come after that. We're living in it. We're living in the results of it. And then for the Sonoma County Sheriff's Department to be paid money by the Grove to sit out there and add extra security is insane to me, when they know for a fact that even if it's like 2% of the people going to it, you know, 2% of 2,000 people, that's still a bit of people that are going into the communities and meeting up with prostitutes that are brought in from all over the country, if not the world. And that's that level of assistance by the local constabulary it blows my mind. I don't understand how. I mean, Mary Moore, you bring up hookers. I heard her personally say, "Oh yeah, no. Okay, that's going to happen. Men are men, you know. No, men.
That's okay. That's
not cool to me, man. So
that's what they're saying. They're okay with that. No, and that's not cool, and I'm not cool with that either.
I respect all their hard work, but you know, the more that I know, the more that I question, and it's an ongoing process for me.
Constantly. Yeah, I mean, they have no problem with that, but the other thing is, where are these prostitutes coming from? Are these part of the child sex trafficking rings and all that stuff that is being brought here? Is it part of that structure? I don't know if you remember a couple years back, there was somebody there who came, and she came with the Google Glasses guy, and she was a young girl, and she was saying that they found her in the tree in the forest or something, and they brought her here. She looked like she was just whacked out.
She did look whacked out.
You were there for that.
I got the impression she was just pushing our buttons, but she did look totally.
Alright, we're going to be doing some live streams here because of some copyright issues. Something happened, so on this channel I cannot do any live videos for 90 days. That means I'm going to be going here to GregFernandezJr.com to this YouTube channel here. Yeah, good luck with that. But you can find it in the channel section, I believe, of this YouTube channel. So sorry about that, but we're going to do some live streams from this stream here from the backup channel, because for 90 days can't do any live streams here. So this is where you'll find me. Hopefully you'll find me there.
Hello, my name is Dan Hennon. Today is June 22nd, 2019, and for this conference call, we are joined with Greg Fernandez Jr., Catherine, and Sophia. And so it's the four of us here tonight. It'll be opened up, basically the call line or the chat line will be opened up for other callers to come in and ask questions, and also use the chat room to ask various questions as well. We're going to be basically providing, I think, just updates and just a discussion tonight to get everyone up to speed. We had the final results of the private investigator come out recently, and we did a show on that, and now it's hopefully asked to answer a bunch of questions from that show. But now tonight we're opening it up as a conference call to all those on the Justice page here, the members, to anything that we missed, anything that we could have gone into. I'm in the process of putting together my questions for Kenneth Main in response of what he wrote. So anything that would be helpful for that would be great. But I think we're ready to go. How is everyone doing tonight?
Awesome.
Yeah, doing good.
Doing fine.
Well, perfect. Perfect. Let's see. Yeah, so where should we, Greg, do you want to, or Catherine, or even Sophia, start off with anything that you've got that relates to updates, questions, or things that have come up since then? Greg, do you want to start off?
Yeah, I was thinking, since we haven't had Catherine really give her side, Catherine, if you want to kind of let us know what your thoughts are now that you've read the 25 pages. And
oh, God bless you, Greg. You're so cute because you remind me of my son. I'm so glad you think I actually read it. I have. In fact, I was
Did you start to read it? Did you read page 1, page 2? How far did you get?
I started with page 1, but I got so angry at this. Yeah, I had to end up taking a nitroglycerin, and I had to put it down. And I skimmed through a lot, well, not a lot, but several of, he was doing bullet points of not only the inconsistencies I had written down, but comments others had made that didn't make sense to them. And his comments of, well, it could have been the dog. Well, I don't see it that way. And I'm like, but you said nothing else. He did not, expand on his thoughts, and I kind of wanted to reach through the screen and shake him a little bit. So I was going to ask you guys, what did he say? And I will go and read it eventually. I will, but right now he just, still makes me pretty angry. But did he make any comments at all about the blunt force trauma?
No, pretty weak. Yeah, let me get to that question. You know what? I'm trying to remember what question that one was. But I know that was in there, but I don't think he said too much on that. I think a lot of people are kind of glossing over that, and even myself, when I first heard it, I kind of glossed over it. So it was good that you kept bringing it up and, kept people on it, because the more that you look at it, the more it's like, oh, yeah, there's something fishy there now.
Yeah, it's so clear, and it is so obvious that there is trauma to that skull cap. And the fact that, these quote-unquote professionals just ignored all of that. And I'm not sure why. That I would kind of like to hear, oh, yeah, see, possible dog activity. I'm sorry, I jumped. But reading his comments, blue blanket over David's leg, possible dog activity. I'm telling you, Paleo was really good at putting blankets very neatly over these guys and, moving the bodies quite nicely. That poor dog.
Yeah, he was covering them up, keeping their toes warm. No problem.
Okay, right there. Okay, that's better. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. You want me to go back a little bit?
No. I was,
Okay.
my head saw one thing and it said something else, so never mind.
All right. I'm going to force you to read this one way or the other.
I know you
You're gonna
are.
read this.
I see how you are, Greg.
But are you saying there's not one? You don't believe at all that there is a possibility that what you see as blunt force trauma, you don't think there's a possibility that that's from the dog at all?
No, there's no way. I mean, if a dog can make a bite mark in the shape of a diamond with a round circular indentation in the middle and a six-sided, I don't know, what's a six-sided diagram? You know, an impression with six sides that are about 1.5 inches to 2 inches. I say, wow, that dog is just impressing me more by the day.
Could that impression be from the gun or anything? Or?
No. When you look at that and you look at the gun, the barrel is round. It just has a circular hole. But these impressions on that scalp they're four-sided, six-sided, and one that has kind of a diamond shape to it, but I think that might be the same four-sided tool that was used that could have hit the scalp in just a different way, where it kind of smushed it together. But those are definitely some type of tool impression, and tool being whatever struck the head.
And Catherine, just to clarify, for Greg, that piece of skull, whether it's the inside or outside of the skull, it's going to be flat and smooth. Think of it like a shell of an egg. When you crack open an egg, it opens up. That inside is smooth, which is also like a skull, and the outside is smooth. There's going to be no dents or anything on that or whatsoever. Now, a gunshot is going to blow, the bone fragments and break it and cause it to go into shards and whatnot. But it's not going to put a dent into the skull itself, and neither would a dog, chewing or biting on it. Those are indentations, is what Catherine is pointing out, and there's like 13 of such indentations, and that is not normal. But I don't think he touched on that at all.
Yes, and Dan is correct. It's smooth to the extent of, well, there could be some rough edges, kind of like a textured wall, but a textured wall doesn't have designs in it per se. It doesn't have a wrench impression. It doesn't have a socket impression. And the only other things that will be on a skull are what are called foramen. And a foramen is simply just a hole. And those are the holes where the nerve endings go through and everything. You have the big, huge one, the foramen magnum, which is the big one where the spinal cord goes through. But I'm talking about in the upper portion of the skull and on the back where the occipital region matches up with the parietal. Now, you'll see one small hole on each side. And those are just foramen. Those are normal. Those are natural. But those are holes. Those are not indentations. And again, I will harp on this too. Again, is the part where you see straight skin. You see smooth, straight edges on the skin from that skull cap piece, and that cannot be done by a gun, cannot be done by a dog, cannot be done by a human ripping it off, and because that would just be gross. But it is smooth and straight, and that is consistent with a knife. And with the knife being at the scene with blood, you would think that at least this quote-unquote private investigator would have looked twice at that.
So I'm pulling up, we got up question number 3, and I think that's where the blunt force trauma comes in. Blood spatter is medium velocity due to blunt force trauma and flows in at least 4 directions. And he says, I am not a blood spatter expert, but everything I see is consistent with the gunshot wound to the head. Did Kenneth Maines get the actual photo, Dan? Do you know? That shows the blunt force trauma and all that?
Yes, I sent that in a secondary email of the things that we as a group have found or discovered. Yep, not part of the police report, but we have found with the circles of those indentations and whatnot.
Correct. Okay. And what I had sent to Dan that I'm not sure if I sent it to you, Greg, and you, Sophia, but when I read his comment about that, I called and spoke with the blood spatter expert, and they are an expert, and told them, because they were the ones that I went in and I did my own research and I did my own schooling, so to speak, on blood spatter, but I made sure I sent what I had found in the photos to the blood spatter expert that I knew. And I read them his comment by, I'm not a blood spatter expert, but everything I see is consistent with the gunshot wound to the head. And the blood spatter expert said, I would stop right there, as I am not a blood spatter expert. And they said, you're right. They're 100% correct. They are not an expert, and they have no idea they have no clue what they're talking about. And their comment about it being consistent with a gunshot wound to the head is totally not in line with what the blood spatter shows at that scene. A gunshot wound to the head doesn't go in 4 different directions, doesn't make, a droplet that has elongated spines. It doesn't, all these things that go along with the blood you see on the floor, that is not consistent with gunshot wounds. And so, he just should have stopped at, I'm not a blood spatter expert, because he clearly does not understand what the blood was saying.
I have a point. This is Dan. For those, if he was, there's four gunshot wounds, 3 to Comel, 1 to Ranny. Your point of saying that they're going in 4 different directions, he may have also, one could argue that if they were high velocity, for instance, they would have 4 different directions because there was 4 gunshots fired in that room. One could argue that, could they not? Catherine, just a point of contention. I'm just being a devil's advocate. I know it's high versus low, medium velocity.
That's good. I'm glad you brought that up, because the point is in the way that blood is moving. The way the blood is on the floor, it shows movement. It shows someone was running or moving quickly, trying to dodge after, as they're being shot or after they're being shot, or being hit in the head or whatever. And again, most of that blood spatter is not from gunshot wounds. It is medium velocity, which only comes from blunt force trauma. And then that blunt force trauma, again, whichever victim it was or victims, someone was definitely moving. Now, could it be from all 4 of them? Hey, it very well possibly could be, but they didn't test it all. So we don't know. We only know of whose blood belonged to who from the small areas that they did test. I wish they would have tested everything. That would have given us a much better picture of that crime scene. But they just kind of looked at the blood on the floor and said, okay, yeah, it's blood on the floor from a gunshot wound. Again, just a total not doing their jobs. My take on it.
Here's a question, Catherine, and see if, with your background, you might know the answer to this. But do you think that Kenneth Maines did his investigation from a point of a detective work versus actually doing forensic analysis? Is that fair to say that there's a difference, or are those two the same thing?
Oh, no, they're totally different. As far as investigating, he didn't do it. From what I see, he didn't do any investigating at all. As far as giving an analysis and looking at what was written and then looking at it from a forensic perspective, I think it would be fair to say he did that, which is why I believe he came to the conclusion he did, because he only looked at the documents and looked at the photos and then just gave an opinion based on the forensic evidence of, okay, these documents say this happened, and okay, I kind of think it did. But I see nothing in what he had written and what I had read so far that even begins to prove he did any individual investigation into the case. Didn't you say he said he wasn't able to access other documents, that he could only get what we gave him?
He thought that what I provided to him, which was everything that we have, was enough for what he needed to come to his conclusion. And he didn't think, because I asked him if there's anything more over and above that we received that he, as a private investigator, could have warranted or could have requested to get, and he says, I don't think that's necessary.
Well, I think, well, he may not think it's necessary, but I think it absolutely is necessary, because I'm not sure, because I'm not an investigator, but one would think that he could at least access the actual police reports and not the supplement reports like we ended up with. So he could have gained a whole lot more information than what we did, and not to say that that information would have provided him with a different outcome than what they wrote in the reports. However, because we don't have that, and because he didn't gain access to that, we don't know if there's anything else that is not consistent with this case. So we can't, you know, we're kind of left to say, well, we're just going to have to go with we don't know. And I'm not okay with that. You know, for what he charged and for what he says his credentials are, and I have no reason to not believe him, but he should have been able to gain access to more, you know, he should have been able to get more than what we did with just simple, I mean, and I don't want to say simple FOIA requests, because I'm sure you guys put a lot of work into that, and but at the same time, he knows what to look for. He says that's his line of business. So he should have been able to think of something that we haven't thought of.
Correct. Okay, I agree. I agree with that.
Yeah, which he might have had a few things in there. I think that maybe, I mean, not that we haven't thought of, but things that maybe weren't mentioned. But a lot of that stuff, or all of it really, goes back to saying that David Crowley is guilty, where, you know, he's talking about, even in question one, where we're talking about, okay, why would the gun be by David's left hand? And, you know, he kind of goes into the same thing. Well, it could be the dog, you know, because of the dog, it's hard to really get that. But he's very clear to say, you know, I will say if it was a staged suicide, the gun would have been placed in David's right hand. But David didn't have a right hand. So that wouldn't, I don't know, it's almost like, it's kind of
and again, I want to take, I want to just say I disagree with his comment on this. The gun would have been placed in David's right hand. I totally disagree with that. And the reason why is because as an EMT, and I even see it in some of the police reports, the way it was written, people tend to forget, unless you do it on a daily basis, when you're walking up to a patient that's lying prone on a floor or sitting up and they're facing you, you're going to assume that their left is their right, because most people, you know, it's just automatic what the brain does. So it was ingrained in us, and we had to constantly repeat, our right is the patient's left. Our right is the patient's left. So the fact that the gun was on the left side makes sense to me. It makes total sense for a staging of the gun, because when they're going to drop that gun on the floor, they're doing it with their right hand, and they're going to drop it not thinking ahead like, oops, that's his left hand. It's going to register to them that it's his right hand because it's on their right side. And he should know that. He's a supposed investigator, and that is like crime scene 101.
All right, let's see here.
Yeah, it just seems, kind of the overall feeling I got, this is Dan, is the overall feeling by reading the report is some of these questions were over his head. And I thought, it made me think that maybe we're asking some of the, maybe the wrong questions or asking them the wrong way, because he was answering those. I think we would have gotten the same answers if we sent this to the Apple Valley Police Department, the detectives there who handle one homicide a year. It's kind of, the answer is kind of similar to that. The reason I went after and hired him in the first place because he was one of the nation's leading private investigators, and so I guess I was looking for more of a robust response in some of these answers, rather than just yes, no, or I disagree or I agree. To your point, Catherine.
Yeah, and I agree with that totally. And I'm looking at too at number 4, the bloody footprints show cleaned up blood when sprayed. And he says, I do not believe this is true. There were visible bloody prints, but they were enhanced with chemicals, which is standard procedure. And this just leads me to believe he did not look at the photos. Because when you look at those photos and then you compare them with the, I forget what they used, but the luminol type product, you clearly see a difference. There is so much more blood that is on that floor that is brought up due to the chemicals than what you see with your naked eye. And that is not the case with actual blood that's left on the floor that would be visible. It is clearly, I mean, you see swipe marks, you see cleaned up spots, and there's no dog tongue marks in this blood, not to be crude, but they try to blame this poor dog for everything. So obviously the dog didn't lick it up. Obviously, what?
Couldn't that be due to what they sprayed, to how they laid down the little glossy foam or film, right? They laid that down. Everything is going to kind of squish. That I really think I would disagree with you on number 4. I don't think that this was cleaned up blood. I don't see that.
Well, and okay, let me go and ask you, how many times have you actually used this type of product to bring blood out to the forefront?
0.
Okay, I have. And this is why I'm telling you, I am looking at this from like a clinical standpoint. You are looking, when you first look at those quote-unquote footprints on the floor, which I still don't believe they're footprints.
You're still going to debate me on that. Okay.
I will. And that's okay. That's what I like about it. You have no problem giving it back, and I love that about you. But the fact still, when you're looking at those prints on the floor and you see circles and then you see a line down from the bottom of that and you see what is an attempt at a ridge, a foot doesn't, the ball of the foot does not make that type of imprint. There will be more included, like more of the ball of the foot, and the toes generally don't leave a line between where the tip of the toe and then the ball of the foot meet. It's usually like the ball of the foot and then you have circles, so to speak, except for the big toe. And then you look at what's on that floor and you see a circle with a line down, a circle with a line down, and it looks, and it's not even skeletonized blood, you know, and that's part of the, so they can't even say that the blood was dried and then part of it flaked off and blew away and then that's why it's not there. Because there is other skeletonized blood spatter on the floor in multiple areas, meaning where drops of blood were, it dried, the middle dried and blew away, either whatever, if the dog was running by or the heat kicked on, but it left a hole in the middle. And when you compare that with these so-called prints, and then you realize there's something seriously wrong with this picture. And then when they spray it, now all of a sudden you see far more blood that was on that floor that you now see because it's microscopic or from being cleaned up. You know, it's kind of, and then you compare that with what you see on the picture previously. They don't match because you go from having a slight print to the sprayed areas now quite solid with blood. That is a huge problem for me.
Catherine, this is Dan. Do you think that some could interpret his response there by saying that there was perhaps multiple bloody footprints throughout the house, but only the 3 or 4 showed up that they elected to spray? Could someone take it and interpret it that way? That's why there's only a few out there?
You know, I don't know if that's what he's saying here, but I think that's a valid point. If there were footprints to begin with, I think that's a very valid point. But again, they didn't spray enough of the house to really find out.
Okay, gotcha. Because all we see in the photos is, that's also what raises the confusion level or question for us, our group, is that why would there just be 3 so-called footprints near the kitchen island, and there's 0 footprints down the hall, in the office, in the bathroom, in the kitchen, by the dishwasher. There's just a couple by the laptop that are very convenient that kind of pins it on the person writing these notes, which is allegedly David. Or are there true footprints throughout the house, but the section they elected to spray the luminol, essentially whatever that chemical is, was just in that area that makes those come to life. And I don't have a background in that, so I don't know. Is that something that would also be more visible once they spray it? And maybe there are other footprints throughout the house. I didn't see any, but wouldn't they be easy to see throughout the house with or without luminol?
If it's invisible to the eye, you truly would need the luminol. And so when we're looking at the floor in a lot of these photos, they had, and I don't think the photographer meant to do this, but they did do a pretty good job at taking things at an angle. So if you're looking at that floor from an angle, you see where the blood is, you see where the quote-unquote prints are, but you look further out and you don't see anything other than a clean floor. So in that case, if there were anything, then yes, they would need to spray it. But and my question has always been, what could they have missed or what could they have found if they had actually sprayed more of that house? You know, what story would that have told everyone?
Well, how would that work? Where they just go around spraying certain areas or something, and just to see if there's anything there? How does this process work?
Well, when I talked to the blood spatter expert, they said, in fact, that was one of the first questions. First of all, they would need to take the swabs, which they did, because oftentimes the luminol will ruin the blood samples, so they need to get all their samples first. But then, yes, they said that they're surprised that the vast majority of that living room was not sprayed and was not put under those lights, the blue lights or whatever they call them, black lights or whatever they use to bring up the luminol. And that was something, for one, they said they would have used the string to find out where the blood spatter was leading from, and then they would have, they would have used the string, they would have taken their samples, and then they would have sprayed almost the entire living room to see if there was more of a story, like was blood cleaned up, or was there invisible blood, or, you know, are you going to see the void patterns? Because obviously, you know, we've talked about this before, where there's a lot of blood on the chair, and there's blood spatter on the floor and a little bit on the rug, but then some on the wall, but then everything else is totally clean. Why is that? And that's what they said they would have looked for.
Or in other words, spraying and seeing if results come up, and then going farther down the hallway until it diminishes, essentially, right?
Correct.
Something like that. Okay.
So, Sophia, do you have any thoughts on this so far before we move on to the next question here?
I mean, the whole scene looks staged.
Agreed.
Overstaged, actually.
Yes.
Like they just kept going back and just redoing things, but the gun placement, I think, was their biggest screw up.
Why do you say that?
Left hand. He's not left-handed. Even if he held it with both hands, for it to land that way is, I just don't see it as plausible. But, I mean, I've been saying this ever since I looked at all the documents, that this whole thing is staged.
I'm having a hard time thinking about what would take his right hand off. Why would his right hand be missing? Because obviously, to me, it seems like the fact that his right hand is missing is why you couldn't put the gun next to his right hand. That would look kind of like what Maines is saying. That would look staged, right?
You know, that's a good point. That's probably what they were thinking. You know, and then come to realize it's like going, well, no, what you did looks staged.
Right, because when they start thinking about how he's going to shoot himself with his left hand, and then if the bullet is going to where it's going to go through his head and everything, it's a very, very tough shot. It's similar to Philip Marshall. It's a little bit different, but very, very similar to where it's like that's a stretch. That's a big stretch to really say that he would take that risk and not just use his right hand, or just, you know, the way that the gun is pointed and where the bullet travels, from what they say. It just seems like a big risk to take if you really want to kill yourself.
Yeah, that's correct. And the Philip Marshall in California, that alleged suicide, the gun was found underneath his body, kind of essentially the body was laying on the floor in the hallway by the front entrance, and it's almost as if someone kind of lifted up part of his body and kind of shoved it underneath there with their foot, kind of just shoved it underneath. And I've never heard of a gun or a pistol or handgun after a suicide being under any part of a body at all, much less. Usually it's near the scene and also near the hand that was used after the weapon dropped. And his was kind of shoved under the body, which I think also sent a message of that it was obviously a hit. This one's just laying by the wrong hand, and like Sophia said, it was an overstaged scene. So that was strange. I do think that Kenneth Maines did go and not assume, try to rationalize each of the things that we thought were staged, and he kind of came back with the answer, well, you know, well, why would they do this? And if it was staged, it obviously would have been like this, and a suicide note would have obviously looked like this, and the gun would have been obviously here, and, you know, so he kind of went through the steps of eliminating the fact that it could have been staged, because someone staging the scene obviously wouldn't do those things. And I disagree with his analysis, although it's rational, it makes sense. But he kind of used that to kind of back into the fact that, well, obviously David did do it, because if someone staged it, they wouldn't have done any of these things because they did them all wrong. Therefore, David did it. It's kind of how he deduced. He came to his conclusion, and I think that's weak. Weak is all I'm saying.
Yes. But oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Sophia.
Were you familiar with the exercises that the military would run like once a year, where they would go into, like, for instance, like mock wars and mock exercises for different situations?
Yes.
And they would set the stage and everything.
Uh-huh.
Okay, this is what this crime scene reminds me of. And how the police went in, they did all the steps that they would for a triple homicide or that kind of thing. I cannot get that thought out of my mind of how this reminds me of these mock wars and exercises that we went through each year.
Sophia, someone in the chat room mentioned that it's similar to a Jade Helm exercise.
Yeah.
Yes, but for the first responders.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, we would have stuff like this all the time. That we would sometimes they would do it at the same time our yearly test needed to be done to get recertified, or every 3 years we needed to get recertified. And sometimes, you know, it would be done at different times, so we'd have to do it twice. But yes, yeah, there are mock mass casualty scenes, and generally is what we would do, the mass cal scenes. But yeah, I had to take part in several of those, and I had not thought about that. But you're correct. This looks a lot like that type of scenario.
And it's just hard to get it out of my mind when I look at everything and I see all the steps that the police did. They went in, they observed the scene, they went through the motions, but then they took it a step further. You know, they ran the DNA test, they closed up the case, that kind of thing. And that's I'm so torn between this being faked or being real. You know, I just cannot find that extra piece of evidence to prove it one way or another. And I don't know. I'm sure there's other people that feel the same way that I do. I'm not ashamed of how I feel, though. It just has a couple. It's hard to explain. It feels kind of fake, but at the same time, there's still 3 bodies that were in that living room. So what happened?
Right.
And the way that they're telling us to stop asking questions, to stop digging, and just accept this crappy narrative. Well, give us.
Pansy.
Hey, Pansy.
I'm a little late coming on, but I'm here.
Yay!
I believe it's overkill. It's too much overkill, and I don't think David would have done that. I really don't.
No, and I agree with you. I mean, with as much as he loved and protected his wife and daughter, in every other place where he's on video, where he's filmed with his family, or, he protected them. He put his body between him and the people he wasn't comfortable with. That is not a man who's going to turn around and do that to his wife. And,
I wouldn't think so.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you guys, too, this was something I was doing some research on, and maybe somebody who has, like, some soldiers out there or something who were actually over in Iran or Iraq. There was something that they said was called when you Mozambique someone, and that what the research was saying is that instead of a double tap, they're shot 3 times, and that is a special type of an assassination, and it's usually almost virtually done 100% of the time by someone in the military. So that tells me that whoever took part in this, if that's even a thing, or maybe the research I was reading is completely wrong, but whoever was part of this, could that be why Kamel had sustained 3 shots?
I think it was Sean Wright who said that this was a double tap.
Yeah, but clearly there are 3 bullets with her hair and skin on it, and tissue and hair. So, Sean Wright. Oh, God, just don't even get me started. I'm trying to be nice, but I don't know. I know, yeah. But if anybody out there who's listening, if you are, previous military, is there such a thing as Mozambiquing someone? And if so, how is that generally done?
Well, isn't that 2 to the chest, 1 to the head, or am I getting it backwards?
No, you're correct. Usually 2 to the chest, 1 to the head. But if you have a target that's moving, I don't know if maybe they just went for whatever was easier.
True. Very true.
So I don't know. That's what I'm kind of curious because it's just something I started reading about, and I just want to know if there's any validity to that research by actual soldiers who have served overseas. But I do want to say that number 5, I want to bring some attention to that, where we're talking about the bullet hole in the ceiling wasn't seen until a month later. And then I do have to say I appreciate his comment on this one, his response being true. To me, it appears to be an oversight, which happens, does not mean it was done out of conspiracy or malice. And that's how that has always sat with me. Like the police were kind of embarrassed that they missed it, so they just have always said, well, okay, yeah, it was there all along. When in reality, it wasn't. It was an oversight. I don't know. Was it there?
That
Was
one
it not
bothers me.
there? But
That his answer really bothers me on that
okay,
for so many
tell me
reasons.
why.
Well, one, because every other person in law enforcement that I have asked has thought that is one of the weirdest things. That's one of the strangest things.
Okay.
I don't know how many law enforcement people has everybody else asked, and do they also agree with Kenneth Maines that, hey, this happens, it's an oversight? Really, I have a big issue with that. But of course, I'm not in law enforcement. I have no idea about their training, so.
Well, you're
But he
right. Go ahead, Pansy.
He also said that was the bullet that killed him, it had his DNA on it, but it didn't. I mean, it had his prints on it, but not any blood or hair.
Yeah, it had DNA, but they didn't tell us where that DNA came from. We only know that it did not come from blood because they swabbed it for blood and didn't find any. So how could that have, and I agree with you, so how could that have been the bullet that killed him?
Yeah, but he agreed that it was.
Yeah, okay, you're right. So I don't agree with him on that at all. Yeah. I think that's a huge mistake. But good points, Greg. Thanks for explaining. That makes so much more sense.
Yeah, that one is just okay. Let's keep moving on here. I guess the other thing that bothers me about number 5 is that it's like nobody said anything about a conspiracy or malice. This is just, this should just be common sense to me. I don't understand that.
But anyways,
the fact is that they
yeah, Greg, that's a good point. This is Dan. When I talked to Kenneth Maines, when I communicated with him, never once did I suggest that it was a cover-up by police or a conspiracy by police or malice or officers not doing their job. I just said, here's what we got, here's what we think potentially happened, and we just want the truth. So a couple times he does mention that he can't believe, or he calls it preposterous, that the police would all cover this up. And that's part of my response back to him is going to cover that exact same point by saying I don't think any of us ever said that the police were involved in a cover-up down to the very level of detail of each detective. Maybe at the higher up level, a very few people at the very top level may have been compromised. I do agree with that, but I don't think there's a cover-up in the police with involving 100 different agents, detectives, and investigators.
And this is where watching that documentary comes into play, because it talks about the group and the admins being conspiracy theories. And I don't think that anything in that paperwork that you sent him even had conspiracy stuff in it. I think it was all the files, wasn't it?
It's just the files from police, and then the various investigative work that the group did, whether it be in video format or other type of research.
Mm-hmm.
but nothing as far as what we think happened as far as theories. I didn't send him anything as far as theories.
No, but he kind of insinuated that we did.
Exactly. That's what I don't like.
Right.
It's probably after watching the documentary.
Mm-hmm.
It's like
Was
Sophia
there
said, it really
anything-
leads down the angle that we're thinking that it's, a police cover-up, and that's not what was done. Eric Nelson himself, went after that angle to make us look like that's what we were saying. We were just saying the evidence doesn't support what the official narrative is, and we want to hire and get someone out there to find out what really did happen. We don't know. We don't know what happened. That's the problem.
Did Kenneth Maines ask for anything at any point, or was it just that you would give him stuff and just did at any point did he ever ask for any specific document or fact or anything like that?
He asked a couple clarifying points, but that was about it, just to make sure he understood, some of the documents. And I was thinking the whole time when I was giving him information and he was responding, that he was very open in doing his job. It wasn't until the very, very last question I asked, that he asked me, that I got to thinking that maybe he's going along with the official narrative. It really wasn't until the very end. And he said, Dan, do you have anything else that confirms their religion and how they got along with their Christianity and the Muslim angle? And I thought to myself, well, that's strange. Why would he ask? Why would that even come into play unless you're going down the official narrative route? And so that's what gave me the very first inkling that he wasn't really overturning every stone in his case. He was just kind of, if that was his question, which I think is a non-question in this entire case, and that was a bizarre question to me that someone of his caliber would be asking. I kind of figured at that point that it wasn't going as in-depth as what I thought this investigation would be doing.
Right.
I don't think he ventured out very much to find anything any different.
Correct. I do agree with that.
Anything else before we move on here to number 7, to the fruit of our labors?
Jeez. Wow.
I was going to say something else, but I held back. Because what I'm noticing here, okay, in some of these questions, everybody should go through these questions, 48 questions, 49 questions. Go through these, see when he gives more detailed answers. On number 7, this is like a paragraph. This might be one of the biggest answers that he really gives here. And we're just talking about fruit, right? We're just talking about, okay, fruit looks fresh. Obviously, there's other things on that counter that kind of look like, there's egg shells, there's butter out, there's bread out, there's whatever else out, all of this different stuff out. And he spends a lot of time here. I think a lot of time, this might be the biggest answer, the longest answer that he gives, at least so far it definitely is. So
well, and what I
find,
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you
Go for
off.
it.
But what I find interesting about his answer is he says, I would want to determine that first and then conduct an experiment in the controlled temperature and environment. And that's what we've been doing, remember, with the fruit, some with kiwi, a lot of us with the bananas. And then some have actually chastised us for doing that. And he himself said he would do the same thing, that he would conduct an experiment. But I think even with all of our experiments, even with all the different variances in temperature people have used, those bananas did not last 3-4 weeks. Nobody got, other than I think one person whose house, but they had an average temperature of maybe 60 degrees, which is a far cry from 68. So theirs lasted the longest. But, I find it interesting that, he would have conducted an experiment. And, well, why didn't he? I mean, he was doing this for a while. Why didn't he do an experiment?
Should we ask him to do a 23-day experiment on the get some kiwis and put some oil in a frying pan and see what happens. Some coffee, right? We got the coffee there too.
Oh,
So,
yeah,
yeah,
great.
we did get chastised about a lot of that. Go for
What
it.
did you find out about the coffee? I'm sorry, I know I'm off topic here, but I kind of dropped off the radar.
Yeah, my coffee molded at about 2.5 weeks. Of course, I get organic coffee, so I'll have to go back and see what type of coffee they had. But people do kind of chastise us for these things. But you know what? These are simple tests that anybody can do that will help. It will help. So whether it makes us look silly for even asking this question, fine. But let's get some clear answers on it.
Yeah.
And you can't do that if you don't take the time to do these tests. So somebody.
But still, you don't know how old those bananas were. We have no idea, really.
Yeah, and I know when I did the banana experiment, I bought organic and regular, and I bought some half green, half ripe, and then I also bought some that were actually on the ripe side to begin with. And so, 'cause like you said, we didn't know, so I figured I'd try all of it.
That's right, and thank you for that. Anything else on the fruit before we move on to number 8 here? All right, so let's look at number 8. Back door was ajar, 1/4 of an inch, according to police reports. This could be signs of something, but again, it could be nothing. Well, it is definitely a sign that there was no need to look for any type of struggle or anybody forcing their way into the house. Doesn't this show that somebody had clear access into the house? Later on, we will get into one of the questions about that there was a kitchen window, which depending on which report he got, if he got the 467 report, that information about the kitchen window might not be in there. But in the most recent one that we do have, the 488-page document, which I would love to give to him and have him actually go through it and read it, that one does show it. And, of course, he doesn't need to read the whole thing. We can send him one little clip that shows that. But that would say you have two things open. Why are the police even talking about, and why are they making such a big deal? Almost every cop, and the ones that didn't put it in their police reports, they were clear to go back and say, hey, I forgot to mention this. We didn't find any signs of people forcing their way in. They go to extreme lengths to point that out, and they gloss over this kind of the same way he's glossing over it.
Yeah, and that right there shows to me that the police were writing from a script or from their crib notes that they have, because, like you said, it doesn't matter. Because they could have, whoever did this could have gained entrance into that house a myriad of ways. Were they let in? Did they come in through the back door while David or Kamel were trying to take out trash? We don't know any of this. And just because there's no forced entry means absolute squat. It's like they watch too much TV.
I think that may be a training thing, because everyone goes to that first. Yeah, the photographer took about 15 photos of that front door, I think, as a checklist off their things to do in training, without taking a step back and realizing we have a back door that's open. We no longer need 15 photographs of the front door. And each of the detectives go out of their way to talk about the fact that there was no forced entry. More of a checklist of their things to do as being a detective, versus the common sense things that we're looking at from a much larger picture, what could and what could not have happened here. No one cares about the forced entry. All these people that we're thinking could have been potential suspects would have been friends with David and Kamel, that would have been easily let into the house in the first place. Correct. Or the back door.
Correct.
And so none of us have ever spent any time wondering if there was forced entry or not. And another thing that the investigators will do is if expensive electronics and valuables are stolen, then they can go in the directory of, was it a robbery? And so they start deducing things like that as well as part of their training, I think. That's just my opinion. I think they're doing that because of training, because that one individual who didn't do the forced entry went back later and made sure that that was in the report. And maybe they're graded on these types of things too, that, But we're just looking at it from an investigation point of view. We don't care necessarily about what's the rules and regulations and what they're supposed to do for their checklist to make sure they checked everything. We're just looking at the case from a common sense point of view, and none of this adds up.
Correct. I agree.
And Kenneth Main's heavy background is as a police detective, is where he spent most of his time, and then he later got into investigation. So I think what I see in reading his report is a lot of checklist types of things, deduction types of things. He's not looking at it from a critical thinking point of mind, from someone on the outside looking in, using critical thinking of what we're doing. He's also another person, I think, that's just going off of a checklist or a textbook or a manual to get to the answer. And that's where we, as a group, think that the Apple Valley Police Department failed, and that may very well be the reason why they failed, is because they were doing that, which gets back to Greg's quote that maybe we have a training issue here. I think those training and textbook manuals are good for normal, everyday, situational types of crimes, but not on a high-level crime like this, which is way out of the scope of anyone, that they got to look at this from all different angles, and which Kenneth Baines was told specifically from the very onset of this investigation that we have multiple things, not just one or two inconsistencies here. We've got 30, 40 different things that don't line up at all. That's why we're asking these questions. We're not just conspiracy folks here coming up with things out of the blue and things in random at the top of our head. These are scientifically and forensically already proven things that either did or did not happen that do not agree with the official police narrative. That's why we're hiring him to expose the weakness in the investigation that I certainly think was very weak.
Agreed. Absolutely agree.
Okay, number 9, and it looks like number 10 is actually the answer to number 9. Is that
that's what I see too. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Because I was like, why didn't he answer 2 questions? Like, what's going on here? How dare you? But okay, but still, it's like, okay. I think we need to. I'm going to write this down. I'm writing down some of the things that we'd like to clarify with him on, because the neighbor might not have been sure, but the neighbor was able to give a certain date, and I do believe that the neighbor was sure that she saw this door open on December 21st. And there's no indication that the door was open or closed anytime between December 21st and when the bodies were actually found. So that might be a good one to clarify with him on, that the neighbor not only didn't see anybody in the house, there was no activity in this house past December 21st, unless you look at the neighbor across the street. But aside from that, the house was dark. Nobody saw anybody there. I think that's a big, big thing that also gets kind of overlooked, like what was going on in this house in December, that it's so quiet. Nobody sees anything, but yet they're all there. They find activity. They find, I think it's either internet activity. I do believe that they find some of that all the way up until December 26th, but they're not giving us dates. They're not showing us, well, there was activity on this date, activity on that date. It sounds like there was nothing going on in that house as far as neighbors could actually see, with the back door open. Now, this neighbor also says that she wasn't sure that if it was the back door or the back screen door that was open, but it was open, and she does not say that it was 1/4 inch. It was open.
Yeah, just to clarify, Greg, that's a huge point. So for the listeners out there, the neighbor from the backyard, their view from the backyard would not be able to notice, a 1/4 inch door being open. She specifically said, I think that the door was open a foot or 2 feet, widely open, or certainly open. And like my personal screen door that I've got for my reader slider, in the wintertime, they're usually both closed. Either that screen door is pulled all the way shut, or sometimes I'll leave it all the way open. But that other door, the glass pane, is also all the way shut or all the way open. So what she saw was important in the fact that it was open. I think it's less important that she couldn't clarify if it's the screen or the glass, because it's winter. I'm guessing it was the glass. But it doesn't make a difference. After that time that she saw it and until the police got there, the width of the open door, whether it's the screen or the glass, was different than how they found it. So the question
and this is
that's the question. That's a very good point.
Yeah, because she I mean, if you really look at the way that report is actually written, it makes you want to hear the testimony that she gives him, because it almost sounds like this report is kind of summarizing it. They're kind of feeding her to say, well, she wasn't sure. But if you look at what it says first, it seems like she was sure. And then they're kind of like, well, no, she wasn't really sure if it was this, or which door it was. When they first talked to her, it sounds like she's telling them that the back door was open. And then they go back and they say, well, she wasn't sure if it was the door or the screen. I think this is why the actual transcript of what these people are saying is so important to this case. It's so important for us to find that stuff, to be able to have access to it, because it might help clear up these questions.
Agreed.
Yep.
All right, so we move on to 11. The knife tested positive for blood of all three, yet it was not visible. Appears to have been washed and no prints on the knife. Not true, he says. Lab report stated there was a mixture of DNA from 2 or more individuals. David, Kamel, and Rania cannot be excluded as possible contributors of the DNA. You will not always get prints from items. That is just the reality of it. It sounds like he's saying, well, and depending on how you read this, I've read this a few times, and
I'm going to take what he's writing.
It's a loaded question.
I'm sorry, Dan, what did you say?
It's kind of a condescending answer, the way I read it myself.
Yes. And this was my question, and then what I have found, and I'm pretty sure that it's answered somewhere else, unless I just read into the answer, which is totally a possibility. But the fact still remains is where the blood was located. It was located in a small crevice on the blade. It was located and then in a small circle that was part of the knife design. And then there was a little bit of blood on the blade. But other than that, it was quote unquote clean. I don't know what else to say. And when you hold something like a knife, you're going to leave your prints on it. I mean, it's not like you can just touch stuff and it just disappears. Your DNA is gone. You know, if they say that they can pull DNA from a bullet fragment that was shot through a ceiling and bounced off, the trusses in the attic and still come up with DNA, you mean to tell me that they can't find DNA from someone who was holding a knife?
Right.
You know, for a house that David lived in, his DNA and his fingerprints are surprisingly lacking.
Yes, they're absent from just about everything. Oh man.
Yeah, I'm gonna kind of side with Kenneth Maines here, only because of the question and the way that the question is phrased. It's almost like too much information in this question. I feel like of course, this is woulda, shoulda, coulda, but it feels like this question should have been phrased in a different way.
Okay, so how should I have phrased it?
I think it should have been more, hey, there was blood found here, there's blood found there. You know, doesn't that show signs of a possible struggle? Doesn't that show signs of somebody in a defensive mode? You know, but I think your question was more towards the actual blood, when it's kind of like, well, there is blood there. We know that there's blood there. We know that this blood cannot be conclusively tied to David Kamel or to Rania. I think that is really the big point there. He can talk about it being, you know, a mixture of two or more people, but there's no indication that David Kamel or Rania are one of the two or more people.
Well, their DNA was found on it. I'm almost positive I remember that correctly. I will go back and look at that again. But the reason why I put the comment as I did is because I never saw the knife being used as a way to intimidate, and that they would find defensive wounds on someone from a knife. I see it in how everything else is played out, like the skull fragment, and how that skin has, you know, straight, sharp edges on the skin. I see the knife as an afterthought, something that was used after they died. And that's just my thought. I've never viewed it as something that was part of the actual murders, but used as a way to remove parts from the body.
But there's no cuts. There's nowhere where
we don't know that
anything being cut.
We don't know that.
Based on the documents that we have, there is nothing where they mention anything being cut. Correct?
Well, that's the problem, because
the remaining bodies, nothing was cut. Correct.
Right, but we have missing hands. We have, you know, and then when you're looking at that ulna and the radius, it's smooth, smooth edges to those bones. So we know the dog wasn't in there gnawing on it, pulling it off, like they try to say it happened. That hand came off somehow. So it wasn't pulled.
But they do say, at the same time that they do say that it was smooth, they do say that there were jagged things that made them think that maybe the dog ripped at his right arm. And looking at that image, you can kind of see that, right? It's not a clean cut, definitely.
But again, we don't have any, but we don't know. And we do see the picture of the scalp, where you see clear, sharp edges on that skin. And that is what that's also what I'm talking about. That was an after the fact. That was post-mortem, when they were deciding to take their heads apart for whatever reason, that part of that scalp was cut away. And was that knife used? That is my question to them. And since it doesn't have enough of the blood, enough blood on it that you would think that type of activity would have caused, to me, that shows that the knife was cleaned off, or they attempted to clean it off, wipe it off, or whatever. And again, the blood could have ended up on the blade edge a number of ways. We just have no idea how that got there, because it was just a small area. But with the blood being in the places like the crevices, if it made it into the crevices but didn't make it all over the knife, that is a huge red flag.
Okay, and then just to be clear here, go ahead, Ken.
Someone's fingerprints had to be on that knife.
That's my thought.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Just to be clear on item 8.1, which is that knife, like you said, there was a mixture of two or more people, and David and Kamel and Rania cannot be excluded. But here's where it gets, where it says that 99.9999.8% of the general population can be. So maybe that's where Captain, maybe that's where you're getting the idea that, well, if 99.9% of the population can be excluded, who else could it be?
And what that means in the medical term and in the terminology of a lab report, when it gives you that specific to that many points out on a decimal point, they are telling you it virtually belongs, the blood belongs to David Kamel or Rania. And since it's 2 or more individuals and there are 3 dead bodies there and they're all closely related, then that, again, it's by process of elimination.
Yeah. Yeah, to me, it sounds like doublespeak. They're talking out of both sides of their mouth, basically.
Yeah, they're trying to say, well, we can't tell you it belongs to them, but we know 2 or 3 people it does belong, 2 or more people it belongs to. However, you basically can rule out the entire world population, but we're not going to tell you it's David and Kamel.
Now, when they talk about this, and then when they talk about this 99.9%, that was the other thing. Where are they getting this from? As a person like me who doesn't understand anything about this stuff, where are they getting this 99% from? Are they including me in this? Are they including people in Minnesota? Where are they getting this number from?
That's how the tests are done. It's kind of like similar with
statistical, actuarial kind of stuff, Greg. It's not a random. It's not a random number, but it's statistics.
Yes, it is a statistical number, and it is basically telling you they use, like, if it had come back saying that they could rule out 80% of the population, that still means that there's a 20% populace out there that could have actually been the contributors, or it could be their blood on that knife. But when they use the terminology of 99.99 or 99.998, in other words, that is lab speak for there is only a 0.00002 or 0.00001% that it belongs to someone other than David Kamel or Rania. In other words, it's theirs. It's their blood.
But based on what? I mean, because what I'm trying to say, am I included in this 99.9%? They have my DNA. Are they sure they have my DNA?
No.
They don't have people's DNA.
Okay.
What are we talking
about? Okay, I see what you're asking now. No. It's not that they have your DNA. They're looking at certain markers in the blood, and that's how they tell people are related. And they're looking at this blood and looking at the markers and the chromosomes and the DNA and all that other stuff. And how does that match up to the blood that they have from David and Kamel? And then if it's really close to that, then that's going to rule out the vast majority of people. So basically, they had a virtual almost 100% match between the blood on the knife and David Kamel and or Rania. So then by process of elimination, if their markers match that blood to such a fine point, then that by process of elimination would rule out the vast majority of everybody else on the planet. So, okay, look at it this way. You have a glass of pure orange juice, and some of that orange juice, spills or whatever, or is it diluted? And if they match up, they're going to test this. Does it match up with actual orange juice, or is it orange juice mixed with Kool-Aid? The Kool-Aid being the other part of the populace. But if it's pure orange juice, then it obviously belongs to the orange and not the Kool-Aid jar. We are, in essence, the Kool-Aid jar. The populace, the general populace, are the Kool-Aid jar, and the family are the oranges. But since it was almost pure their DNA, their blood markers, it's their blood. In other words, nobody else truly could be a contributor. Does not mean that they have your DNA. Dan, can you help me explain this? You're a stats guy.
It's basically, they can't say that it's 100% not someone's blood or 100%, or, you know, essentially. So they got to do this statistical analysis that shows that it's 99.9998, you know, certain that it's not someone else's blood. So that's their way to get out of it, because they can't say 100%. It's kind of going back to DNA and genetics and things like that. If you're tracing back your history roots, you know, you might be 15% this and 25% that. So it's the statistics that they use. It's the result that comes back when they push the button on the computer.
Yeah, and look, the other way too is like when you have DNA tests done to determine who is someone's father, right? You take the mother and the daughter, you compare their blood, and then you have your sample of dudes out there. And the guy, one guy's going to come back with a 99.998% possibility of being that baby's father. In other words, that's the baby daddy. There is no, all the other guys can then at that point walk away. They don't even have, they can breathe a total sigh of relief because that is the father. So it's kind of the same way here. That blood came back as 99 point whatever % as David Kamel and or Rania.
That was like a Maury Povich reference right there. Who is the dad type of thing, right? That's what we're talking about.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, exactly.
This might be just as accurate. Okay.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to bring Maury into it.
No, it's okay. I love Maury. Maury's awesome. Married to Connie Chung, too. How can you go wrong? Okay, so number 12, no apparent blood in the area around the knife, and his answer is the knife may not have even come into play. There was no indication of stab wounds. Okay, first of all, the knife comes into play because the knife is there and the knife has blood on it.
Thank you.
The knife is in play, and the knife is open.
Thank you.
If the knife was closed in somebody's pocket, I could see it could not come into play. But so we have I have two, I mean, obviously everybody else, you probably see the same thing. Two interesting answers here, right? Can I get your guys' view on these answers that we're seeing here?
Okay, Sophia, Dan, or Pansy, somebody jump in.
Okay, question again.
Okay, go ahead.
Question again. I didn't hear it.
Oh, I can jump in with mine. I think that he believes, from reading the police report, which is I think all that Kenneth Maines did, is that there's nothing that shows that the knife was in play during the commission of this crime, and that's why I think that he used that phrase. Now we know, because we're taking a step back to look at it from a much bigger picture and using our critical minds to do that. The Apple Valley Police just said that there's a gun, there's bullet casings, bullet fragments, and people that died of bullet wounds. And yes, there's a knife sitting there, but that's got nothing to do with it. So they just overlooked it. And then he just repeated that and regurgitated by saying that, I don't know what the knife's got to do with anything. Maybe it wasn't even in play during the commission of this crime. Well, that's just him agreeing with that, and maybe it wasn't, but the fact that Greg's point was good. There's a knife at the scene. There's knife with the knife has blood on it, and it's there, even though it wasn't obviously used in somewhere with the shooting. It was obviously used somehow in something. It was in play. It was used somehow. The question is what? We don't know that. But he eliminated it, I think, just by saying that I read the report 15 times and I don't think the knife was used. Well, that's not what we hired him for, to regurgitate what the Apple Valley Police Department said. That knife is very important, I think, in this case.
Agreed. And the thing, too, you have to keep in mind is, like, what are they going to do? Blame the dog on putting the knife next to David now? Oh, the dog took it off the table and dropped it next to David. He opened it, and it's like, come on, use your brain. Just because there were no indication of stab wounds does not mean a knife wasn't used. There are more types of ways to use a knife other than to stab.
Right.
I'm sorry, Pansy. Go ahead.
I said right, but you know, he had this deal about the dog covering everybody up with these blankets, and one of them laying on it and all this other. I don't believe that.
Oh, man.
The dog covered him up.
You're right.
The dog covered David up, and he tucked it gently under Ronnie and them, and, you know, the dog did his thing.
Any other thing on the knife? Sophia, anything else you want to add about the knife?
I think it actually is important because it's, like you all have said, it's there laying amongst three bodies. It's open. So it should be included. And everybody just glossed over it. But
yeah, screw it. We got a knife there, but, you know, we're not going to look at the knife. We're not going to look up. We're not going to look at the ceiling, apparently. So,
you know,
just
Paleo opened it while he was playing amongst everything and tearing up toys. And so, yeah, we're just going to discard it because the dog did it.
Yeah, he got tired of playing with that raccoon, so he decided to play with the knife.
smart dog.
And the blanket.
He can open up the knife.
Yes, and the blanket. Oh, man.
All right, so number 13, writing on the wall does not match David. This cannot be determined, is what he answered. Writing with a pen or pencil during the course of your everyday routines is very different than smearing something on this wall. You cannot compare handwriting to something painted or smeared on an area. The fact is, they could not tie that writing on that wall to David Crowley, and he glosses over that. So again,
Correct.
There might be a question of maybe the question wasn't phrased right, but anybody looking at this question would have come and see, well, wait a minute. Yeah, he is right. It cannot be determined. So that means, how did they say that David wrote anything on this wall? They only took 2 samples. They took 2 samples and they did nothing with them. Nothing.
Correct.
I can, this is Dan, I can clarify this, I believe. Item 13, I think, can be taken 2 ways. One, Greg, was what you say, that his answer was that it can't be tied or can't be matched to David. I agree with that because the report said that, I don't know what the report said, there's David's DNA was on that wall, I think, which for someone living in the house, his DNA should be all over that wall. So
no,
my question was
only Kamel's. Only Kamel's.
David's DNA was on the living room wall, right? That was in the police report.
I didn't read that.
Oh.
No.
Okay, because so we know it's Kamel's blood that's on the wall.
Correct.
But they thought from the forensics of Apple Valley Police, they found David's DNA on that wall. Therefore, they thought that he did the writing of the blood, which I do not agree with. But I do think it said somewhere in that 94-page report that the test came back and his DNA was on that wall. And that could have been a skin cell transfer from him, moving the couch or nailing a clock on the wall and moving furniture. His DNA is probably all over that wall. So that's not a conclusive way to deduce that. Now, what I sent to Kenneth Maines was my personal video on YouTube that I did showing David's handwriting and saying David's writing doesn't match what's on that wall. And I think this is what he's referring to on number 13 is you can't determine it, and I agree with what he's saying from a textbook perspective. Writing with a pen or pencil on a piece of paper is one thing. Writing on the wall is completely different. I agree with him there that you can't do that. You can't make that jump. That's what I think he's referring to here, that it doesn't match. It doesn't match his writing. Now, I could also go a step further that, it's all capitals, therefore David writes in lowercase, so it doesn't make sense. I do think some of those letters are written with someone's left hand, and David is not left-handed. So his should all be written, if he did indeed do it, which we know that he didn't do it, all be right-handed. Some of those letters do look like they're written by a left-handed person and a right-handed person.
Right,
So
and
I think
that was the whole point.
that was the point
So
of the
I
question.
totally missed that. Okay, that was my fault. I totally misunderstood the question.
Yeah.
And see, and that was my point. What you just said, when I said the writing on the wall doesn't match David, it doesn't. When you look at that A, David has a very specific way of writing his capital A's. And I will take issue with when he says you cannot compare to something painted or smeared. That is incorrect. People are going to follow the same. If they write up, down, and sideways on paper, they're going to write up, down, and sideways on a wall. You're going to still follow. Your handwriting is your handwriting. Now, it will look a little different, but the A's and the B's and the K's are like night and day. Totally different.
The strokes is what you go by. The strokes.
Correct. Strokes. Thank you. That's the word.
I thought
I
it
agree
was
with
only
you there.
Kamel's DNA on that wall.
That's what I thought.
Correct. That is correct. And they took 2 samples, only did 1 test.
Oh.
So great job again. Okay, anything else on the wall? I think the only other thing that I would want to let everybody know that everybody, we just need to be conscious of is, obviously, I mean, you have 3 notes here in 3 separate rooms for whatever reason. They cannot put on the blood writing on this wall. There's no latent prints. There's no fingerprints either, which was something that some people had tried to tell us first, that, oh, this is definitely David's fingerprints. Oh, it's definitely David did it. And obviously none of that is true. So the fact is, nobody knows. The police don't know. Investigators don't know. Anybody who has looked at this case, you cannot tell me that David wrote that there. It is not conclusive that David wrote that. And there was no indication that would lead you to think that David wrote that other than pure speculation based on a theory that has nothing to back it up with.
That's right.
Okay, number 14, David's fingerprints are not on the gun, nor are anyone else's. Okay, well then let's just blame David, right? Let's just blame him. If it's nobody else's, who else could it be?
But see, and that's where he's wrong, because there were latent prints they found on that gun, on the magazine. But they say that they found a latent palm print on the gun, and the fingerprints, which they believe are 2 or more on the magazine. But still, they cannot make those David. They don't match David's.
They don't match David because they don't have a palm print. They do have a fingerprint of David, and they could not match the 2, item 1A and I believe item 1B. They could not match item 1A-3, the trigger of the gun, and item 1B-1, the magazine of the gun. Neither of those, they can't put the gun in David's hand. They can't put the actual magazine in David's hand. They can't do anything. They can't put the pen in David. The only connection, the only print that matches David is on the notepad found where he wrote "Submit to Allah," "Open the Rise," the latest version, whatever. That's it. That's not much.
Yeah.
And if he wrote that, it makes obvious sense that his fingerprints or DNA would even be on it. But I mean,
and again, that we don't know if it was done under duress.
And we don't even know when it was written.
Right.
I think and this is Dan, I think the most important part of the blood writing on the wall is that there's no fingerprints at all, which means a glove or rubber gloves were used to write it, which eliminates David. Why would you do this if you're trying to kill your wife and daughter and yourself? Why would you now find a reason to put on a pair of rubber gloves? That's the question.
Yep.
No fingerprints were on there, much less David's or anyone else's. And so why was potentially a pair of rubber gloves used to do the writing?
And where did they go?
And where did they go? Along with the hands, the 3 hands, and the 1 arm.
Right.
Where did they go?
Yep.
Those bones are gone. That arm is gone. Who took the arm?
Yeah, the majority of their skull gone.
Yep. And,
Oh, the dog
yeah.
ate them. No. Don't believe it.
And the important thing, I know it's coming up in a bit here, Greg, down the road, but the arm missing, regardless, my stance is regardless if the arm was cut off or the dog chewed it off, the problem with the arm